What would you do if your government outlawed your faith, destroyed your holy books, and demanded you worship foreign gods or face execution? This scenario is exactly what happened to the Jewish people over 2,000 years ago under the brutal reign of Antiochus Epiphanes. Today, we're diving into the complete, unfiltered story of the Maccabees, a family that sparked one of history's most incredible religious revolts. You'll discover how a small band of faithful believers took on the mighty Greek Empire, why they chose warfare over submission, and how their unlikely victory changed the course of history forever. But before we get into it, consider hitting that like button and subscribing if you haven't already. Your support means we continue producing these videos to help you learn something new or pass the time. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. We're building a global community here. So without further ado, let's begin, shall we? The calm before the storm. Picture ancient Judea in the 3rd century before Christ. Rolling hills stretch toward Jerusalem's stone walls. Olive groves shimmer in morning light. The temple stands proud against the sky, its white limestone catching every ray of sun. This land breathes with quiet devotion. Farmers tend their fields, merchants haggle in dusty markets. Children learn Torah verses from weathered scrolls. Yet beneath this peaceful surface, currents shift like underground rivers. Judea sits at the crossroads of empires. To the north, the Seleucid dynasty rules from Antioch. Their Greek culture flows southward like honey, sweet but foreign. To the south, Egypt's Ptolemies watch with careful eyes. Between these giants, the Jewish people maintain their ancient ways. The priests perform their rituals. Smoke rises from altar fires. Pilgrims journey to Jerusalem for the festivals. Everything appears as it has for generations. The rhythm of religious life continues unbroken. Sabbath follows Sabbath. New moons mark the passing months. The covenant with their God feels secure and eternal. But change moves slowly at first, then all at once. Greek merchants arrive with fine goods and new ideas. Soldiers march through carrying foreign standards. Officials speak in tongues that sound like music but carry unknown meanings. The Greek language becomes useful for trade. Some families begin teaching it to their sons alongside Hebrew. Alexander the Great conquered this region decades ago. His empire shattered after his death, but his vision lives on. Greek cities dot the landscape. Greek customs spread like seeds on fertile ground. The idea of Hellenism, becoming Greek in thought and deed, whispers through conversations in Jerusalem's streets. Most Jews resist these whispers. Their traditions run deeper than empire. Abraham walked this land. Moses gave them laws that govern every aspect of life. The temple service connects them to heaven itself. Why would they need Greek philosophy when they have divine wisdom? Why Greek games when they have sacred festivals? The high priest governs from the temple. He speaks with Roman governors and Greek officials. He must balance competing pressures, keep the peace, maintain the traditions, satisfy foreign rulers who grow impatient with stubborn customs. This delicate dance has worked for decades. The Jewish people remain distinct while living under foreign rule. Taxes flow to distant capitals. Greek becomes the language of administration. Yet Jewish courts still judge according to Moses' law. Circumcision marks every Jewish boy. The Sabbath brings all work to a halt. Dietary laws separate Jewish tables from Gentile ones. These boundaries feel strong and permanent. Prosperity grows in Jerusalem. Trade routes bring wealth. The temple receives generous donations. New buildings rise. The upper classes adopt some Greek customs, wearing Greek clothing, using Greek names, learning Greek literature. They see this as practical adaptation. Keep what matters, adjust what doesn't. Survival requires flexibility, but flexibility has limits. At what point does adaptation become betrayal? When does practical compromise cross into spiritual surrender? These questions simmer in rabbinical debates. Faithful Jews watch their neighbors with growing unease. Greek customs feel like an invasion dressed as progress. The Seleucid Empire needs money constantly. Wars drain their treasury. Rebellions demand expensive responses. Officials eye the temple's wealth with increasing interest. They calculate how much gold sits in Jerusalem's holy chambers. Economic pressure builds like water behind a dam. Religious festivals continue as they always have. Passover brings thousands to Jerusalem. The harvest celebrations fill the temple courts with grateful families. Yet even these sacred gatherings carry new tensions. Which families have adopted Greek names? Who sends their sons to Greek schools? Who practices Greek sports? These divisions grow deeper each season. The Torah remains unchanged. Its words speak the same truths they have always spoken. But the world around those words shifts like sand in wind. New questions arise that ancient answers don't address. How should faithful Jews respond to Greek philosophy? Can they participate in Greek cultural events without compromising their souls? Young men especially feel torn between worlds. Jewish tradition offers meaning and identity. Greek culture promises opportunity and advancement. The gymnasium trains bodies for competition. The temple trains souls for eternity. Both paths demand complete devotion. Priests debate these tensions in private chambers. Some argue for strict separation. Others counsel careful engagement. The high priest seeks wisdom from heaven while managing earthly pressures. His decisions will shape the future of Jewish life in ways no one yet imagines. The sun sets over Jerusalem, as it has for centuries. Evening prayers echo from synagogues, families gather for meals, blessed by ancient words. Children drift to sleep hearing stories of their ancestors' faith. Tomorrow will bring another day in this land between empires, between traditions, between certainties that once seemed unshakable. But change accelerates in ways that comfort cannot contain. The calm before the storm grows shorter each passing season. Forces gather beyond the horizon that will test every assumption about faith, culture, and survival. The Jewish people stand at a crossroads they do not yet see, approaching decisions that will echo through history. Hellenism arrives at the temple gates. Greek culture flows into Jerusalem like water finding new channels. At first, the changes seem small and harmless. Merchants use Greek weights and measures. Officials write documents in Greek script. Young men learn Greek poetry alongside Hebrew psalms. These shifts feel like natural adaptation to a changing world. The gymnasium rises near the Temple Mount. This Greek institution brings new ideas about the human body and physical training. Athletes exercise without clothing, celebrating the beauty of physical form. This practice shocks traditional Jews who value modesty above all else. Yet some young Jewish men find themselves drawn to these activities. Greek education emphasizes rhetoric and philosophy. Students learn to argue different sides of complex questions. They study mathematics, astronomy, and literature from across the known world. Jewish parents face difficult choices. Should their sons receive this broader education? Will they lose their Jewish identity in the process? The upper classes in Jerusalem begin adopting Greek names alongside their Hebrew ones. Joseph becomes Josephus. Joshua becomes Jason. These double identities seem practical for dealing with Greek officials and merchants, but they also represent a foot in each world, loyalty divided between competing visions of life. Greek festivals arrive with their own calendar of celebrations. These events honor various gods and goddesses unknown to Jewish tradition. Athletic competitions, theatrical performances, and philosophical discussions mark these occasions. Some Jews attend as observers. Others worry that any participation compromises their covenant with the one true God. The Greek concept of citizenship differs radically from Jewish belonging. Greeks define themselves by participation in the polis, the city-state community. Jews define themselves through descent from Abraham and adherence to divine law. These two forms of identity create tensions that grow more complex each generation. Theater comes to Jerusalem with its masked actors and dramatic stories. Greek plays explore themes of fate, honor, and human nature. Some Jewish intellectuals appreciate these artistic expressions. Others see them as dangerous influences that might corrupt Jewish young people with foreign values and questionable moral lessons. Trade relationships deepen as Greek merchants establish permanent shops in Jerusalem. Jewish craftsmen learn Greek techniques. Farming methods change. Architecture adopts Greek elements. The physical appearance of the city gradually shifts toward Greek aesthetic standards. Change happens so slowly that each individual alteration seems insignificant. Greek philosophy raises questions that Jewish theology has answered differently. Should reason guide faith, or should faith guide reason? Can human wisdom complement divine revelation? Do the soul and body have separate destinies? These intellectual challenges attract some Jewish thinkers while alarming others. The institution of the gymnasium becomes particularly controversial. Physical training in the nude violates Jewish standards of modesty. Some young Jewish men attempt to reverse their circumcision to participate without shame. This practice horrifies their families and religious leaders. The very mark of the covenant becomes a source of embarrassment. Political structures shift as Greek administrative methods take hold. Officials use Greek legal procedures alongside Jewish law. This creates confusion about which authority governs which situations. Jews find themselves subject to multiple legal systems that sometimes contradict each other. Marriage customs begin changing as some Jewish families arrange unions with Greek families. These mixed marriages create households where different languages, customs, and religious practices compete for dominance. Children from these unions face identity questions their grandparents never imagined. The temple priesthood splits between those who embrace Greek learning and those who resist it. Some priests study Greek texts to better understand the wider world. Others insist that Torah contains all necessary wisdom. These divisions create factions within the religious leadership that will have profound consequences. Greek medical knowledge arrives with its emphasis on natural causes and treatments. This conflicts with Jewish understanding of illness as related to divine will and moral behavior. Some Jews embrace these new healing methods. Others worry that accepting Greek medicine means rejecting God's sovereignty over health and sickness. Economic pressures intensify as Greek trade networks demand standardized practices. Jewish merchants must choose between traditional methods blessed by generations of use and new approaches that promise greater profits. Success in business increasingly requires Greek language skills and cultural knowledge. The Jewish calendar competes with the Greek calendar for organizing daily life. Religious festivals follow ancient patterns based on lunar months. Business and government operate according to Greek solar calculations. This dual time system creates constant confusion and forces Jews to live according to two different rhythms. Educational systems diverge as some Jewish families choose Greek schools for their children. These students learn different subjects, different methods of thinking, and different values than their traditionally educated peers. Childhood friendships cross cultural lines that parents struggle to navigate. Religious debates intensify as Greek philosophy offers alternative explanations for questions Jews have always answered through Scripture. The nature of God, the purpose of life, the meaning of justice, all these fundamental concerns receive different treatments in Greek thought. Some Jews find these perspectives enriching. Others find them threatening. The high priest faces increasing pressure to accommodate Greek customs in temple practices. Seleucid officials hint that religious services might become more acceptable to their broader population with certain modifications. These suggestions create dilemmas that test the boundaries of faithful compromise. Greek artistic styles influence Jewish craftsmen and builders. Decorative elements borrowed from Greek temples appear in Jewish buildings. Some see this as beautiful enhancement. Others view it as contamination of sacred spaces with pagan symbols. These aesthetic choices carry theological implications. Language itself becomes a battleground as Greek words enter Hebrew conversation. Technical terms, administrative language, and cultural concepts require new vocabulary. Some Jews resist these linguistic changes as threats to Hebrew's sacred character. Others embrace them as necessary tools for modern life. The tension builds between those who see Greek influence as opportunity and those who see it as invasion. Both sides claim to serve the best interests of the Jewish people. Both invoke ancient wisdom to justify their positions. But their competing visions of faithfulness pull the community in opposite directions. This cultural pressure creates an identity crisis that reaches into every Jewish home. Parents wonder which traditions to maintain and which to modify. Young people struggle between ancestral wisdom and contemporary opportunities. The community fragments along lines that grow deeper with each passing season. Antiochus IV, God King or Madman? In the year 175 before Christ, a man claims the throne of the Seleucid Empire who believes himself touched by divinity. Antiochus IV takes the title Epiphanes, meaning the manifest God. This choice reveals both his ambition and his dangerous delusion. He sees himself as Zeus incarnate, walking among mortals to bring Greek civilization to the world's darkest corners. His path to power runs through blood and betrayal. The rightful heir dies under mysterious circumstances. Antiochus returns from Rome, where he lived as a hostage, bringing Roman ideas about absolute rule and divine kingship. He combines Greek culture with Roman efficiency and Oriental despotism. This mixture creates a ruler unlike any his empire has known. Antiochus possesses genuine intelligence and cultural sophistication. He speaks multiple languages fluently. His knowledge of Greek literature impresses scholars. He patronizes arts and sciences throughout his realm. Cities compete for his attention, hoping to receive grand building projects and cultural institutions. On the surface, he appears to be an ideal Hellenistic monarch. But beneath this polished exterior lurks something unstable and menacing. Antiochus displays unpredictable moods that swing from generous patronage to savage cruelty. Advisors learn to read his expressions carefully, knowing that a wrong word might cost their lives. His court becomes a place of whispered conversations and constant fear. The king's religious beliefs center on his own divinity. He commissions statues showing himself as Zeus, complete with thunderbolt and eagle. Coins bear his image alongside divine symbols. Temples throughout his empire receive orders to worship him as a god. This represents more than political theater. Antiochus truly believes he carries divine essence within human form. His building projects reflect this grandiose self-image. The Temple of Zeus in Athens receives his patronage, finally completing construction that had languished for centuries. He establishes new cities bearing his name. Existing cities must rename streets and buildings to honor him. Architecture becomes a tool of divine propaganda. Military campaigns consume his attention and treasury. Antiochus dreams of restoring Alexander's empire to its full extent. He launches expeditions into Egypt, seeking to add the Ptolemaic kingdom to his domain. These wars drain resources while providing irregular success. Victory in one battle leads to defeat in the next. Roman power grows during Antiochus's reign, and he must navigate this dangerous relationship carefully. Rome tolerates him as long as he serves their interests, but they watch his expansion attempts with suspicion. A Roman senator can humble him with a single word, as happens when Popilius Laenas draws a circle in Egyptian sand and demands an immediate answer about withdrawing from Alexandria. The king's relationship with money becomes increasingly erratic. He gives lavish gifts to favored cities and individuals. He funds expensive public works and military expeditions. But these expenditures outpace his income, forcing him to seek new sources of revenue. His attention turns toward the wealthy temples throughout his kingdom. Antiochus views religious diversity as weakness within his empire. Unity requires uniform culture and beliefs. Local customs and practices fragment imperial loyalty. The Jewish people represent a particularly troublesome example of stubborn resistance to Greek civilization. Their monotheistic beliefs directly challenge his claims to divinity. His earliest interactions with Jewish leadership seem promising. The high priest Jason pays substantial bribes for his position and promises to promote Greek customs in Jerusalem. Antiochus interprets this cooperation as evidence that Jews can be successfully Hellenized. He fails to understand the depth of religious conviction that underlies Jewish resistance. The king's advisors include both Greeks and Orientals who compete for his favor. Some counsel patience with local customs. Others advocate forceful suppression of non-Greek practices. Antiochus listens to different voices at different times, creating inconsistent policies that confuse his subjects and officials. Personal relationships suffer under the weight of his megalomania. Family members become potential threats to his power. Friends receive suspicion rather than trust. Marriage serves political purposes rather than personal connection. The king isolates himself through his own paranoia and grandiose pretensions. Mental stability becomes questionable as pressures mount. Ancient historians describe erratic behavior that suggests psychological disturbance. He appears at public events in costumes that embarrass his courtiers. He gives contradictory orders and forgets promises made days earlier. Some whisper that the gods have cursed him with madness. His understanding of Jewish religion reveals dangerous ignorance. Antiochus assumes that Jews worship their god in the same way Greeks worship Zeus, as one deity among many who might accept other gods as partners. He cannot comprehend absolute monotheism or the exclusive loyalty it demands. The king's financial needs grow desperate as military campaigns continue draining his treasury. Reports of the temple's wealth in Jerusalem attract his attention. Advisors describe vast stores of gold and silver that could fund years of warfare. This information plants seeds of future conflict. Religious persecution begins gradually as Antiochus tests Jewish responses to various restrictions, small regulations about temple practices, minor changes to festival observances. These early measures seem designed to gauge resistance levels rather than eliminate Jewish faith entirely, but they establish precedents for more severe actions. The king's court culture emphasizes pleasure and luxury. Banquets feature exotic foods and expensive entertainment. Courtiers compete to display wealth and sophistication. This atmosphere of indulgence contrasts sharply with Jewish values of moderation and spiritual focus. The cultural gap widens as Antiochus becomes more committed to Greek lifestyle. His diplomatic approach combines threats with bribes. Cities that accept his cultural programs receive rewards. Those that resist face economic penalties or military pressure. Antiochus believes that consistent application of these incentives will eventually overcome any opposition to his vision of universal Hellenization. The king's legacy plans center on his divine status. He expects future generations to worship him as a god alongside Zeus and other Olympian deities. Temples must prepare for his posthumous cult. Priests must learn rituals honoring his memory. These preparations reveal how completely he has convinced himself of his own divinity. But the gap between his self-image and reality grows ever wider. Military setbacks multiply. Financial crisis deepens. Religious resistance strengthens. The god-king who promised to unite the world under Greek culture faces mounting evidence that his divine powers cannot overcome human stubbornness and local loyalty. When the Torah was outlawed. The year 167 brings decrees that shatter Jewish life like stones thrown through windows. Antiochus IV issues orders that transform religious devotion into criminal activity. The documents arrive in Jerusalem written in formal Greek, their legal language cold and precise, but their meaning burns through Jewish communities like wildfire. Circumcision becomes forbidden throughout the Seleucid Empire. This ancient sign of the covenant between God and Abraham's descendants must cease immediately. Parents who circumcise their sons face execution. Doctors who perform the procedure meet the same fate. The very mark that identifies Jewish males becomes grounds for the death penalty. Sabbath observance joins the list of capital crimes. No Jew may cease work on the seventh day. Markets must remain open. Craftsmen must continue their labor. Farmers must tend their fields. The rhythm of rest that has marked Jewish time for centuries becomes evidence of disloyalty to the king's divine authority. Torah scrolls receive orders for destruction wherever found. Soldiers conduct house-to-house searches, seeking the sacred writings that contain Jewish law and history. These ancient texts, copied by scribes with reverent care, feed bonfires in town squares. Owning even fragments of scripture brings punishment that extends to entire families. Study of Jewish law transforms into seditious activity. Rabbis who teach traditional interpretations of divine commandments face arrest. Students who gather to learn Hebrew face questioning by royal officials. The oral traditions passed from teacher to student for generations must silence themselves or risk violent suppression. Dietary laws fall under the decree's scope. Jews must eat pork and other forbidden foods to demonstrate their rejection of ancestral customs. Households must prepare meals according to Greek standards. The careful separation between clean and unclean foods that governed Jewish tables for centuries collapses under royal command. Festival celebrations become illegal gatherings. Passover, with its story of liberation from oppression, particularly offends royal sensibilities. The autumn harvest festivals that thank God for his provision cannot continue. The Day of Atonement, when Jews seek forgiveness for their sins, contradicts the king's claim that only he can mediate between heaven and earth. Enforcement begins immediately as royal officials arrive in Jewish towns with detailed instructions. They carry weapons and authority to act without local consultation. Resistance means immediate punishment. Cooperation might earn temporary safety. But these officials make clear that partial compliance will not satisfy the king's demands. The temple in Jerusalem faces systematic desecration. Priests receive orders to abandon traditional sacrifices and ceremonies. The sacred vessels used for divine service must be melted down or sent to Antioch. The altar where Jews have offered sacrifices for centuries must host new rituals honoring Greek gods. Hebrew language comes under attack as part of the cultural suppression. Official documents must use Greek. Legal proceedings require Greek translation. Educational instruction must abandon Hebrew texts. The sacred tongue that carries Jewish prayers and scriptures faces extinction through systematic neglect. Jewish courts lose authority to settle disputes according to Torah law. All legal matters must follow Greek procedures and standards. Marriage contracts, business agreements, and property transfers must conform to Seleucid legal codes. The judicial system that maintained Jewish community life for generations dissolves under foreign regulation. Ritual purity laws that govern temple service and daily life become meaningless under the new restrictions. The careful distinctions between sacred and profane spaces disappear. Priests who maintained ceremonial cleanliness find themselves forced to participate in activities that violate their deepest convictions about holiness and contamination. Underground resistance begins forming as Jews seek ways to maintain their faith despite the penalties. Secret gatherings replace public worship. Hidden scrolls preserve scriptural knowledge. Whispered prayers continue ancient liturgies. But these activities carry constant danger as informers watch for signs of continued religious practice. Economic pressure reinforces the religious decrees. Jewish merchants who refuse to abandon dietary laws lose trading privileges. Craftsmen who observe Sabbath restrictions cannot obtain raw materials. Farmers who follow agricultural laws about mixed crops face confiscation of their land. Survival requires compromise or concealment. Children suffer particular trauma as traditional education systems collapse. Jewish parents must choose between sending children to Greek schools that teach pagan values or keeping them ignorant of formal learning. The transmission of Jewish knowledge from generation to generation faces its gravest threat since the Babylonian exile. Marriage customs change as Jewish families cannot perform traditional ceremonies. Wedding contracts must follow Greek legal forms. Circumcision of male children requires secrecy and danger. Naming practices must conform to Greek standards. The most intimate family relationships face scrutiny and regulation. Women find their traditional roles transformed by the new restrictions. Jewish law provided specific protections and responsibilities for women that Greek custom handles differently. Ritual observances that marked women's spiritual lives become criminal activity. The domestic sphere, where Jewish culture was preserved and transmitted, comes under assault. Religious leaders face impossible choices between martyrdom and apostasy. Some flee to remote areas where enforcement might be less strict. Others attempt to find compromise positions that preserve essential beliefs while accepting surface compliance. A few openly defy the decrees, accepting the consequences that follow. The psychological impact devastates Jewish communities as their entire worldview faces systematic destruction. Practices that connected them to divine purpose become crimes against royal authority. The meaning they found in ancient traditions must be abandoned or hidden. Identity itself becomes dangerous in ways their ancestors never imagined. Community solidarity strains under the pressure of individual survival decisions. Families that comply with the decrees face suspicion from those who resist. Those who resist endanger everyone around them. Trust erodes as neighbors become potential informers. The social bonds that held Jewish communities together begin fraying under external pressure. But beneath the surface, compliance and visible submission, something else stirs. Anger builds alongside fear. Stories of martyrs who chose death over apostasy spread through whispered conversations. The memory of ancient deliverances from Egyptian and Babylonian oppression takes on new relevance. Faith deepens even as its expression becomes deadly. Blood on the altar. The ultimate violation comes on a winter day in 167. Royal soldiers march into the temple courts carrying objects that make faithful Jews avert their eyes in horror. They bring a statue of Zeus bearing the face of Antiochus IV. They bring pigs for sacrifice. They bring fire that will desecrate the altar where Jewish priests have offered pure sacrifices for centuries. The Temple Mount falls silent, except for the sound of marching feet and clanking armor. No Jewish voices raise in prayer. No Hebrew songs echo from the sacred precincts. The Levites who once filled these courts with holy music have fled or been imprisoned. The priests who served at the altar face a choice between participation in abomination or death. Soldiers position the Zeus statue in the holy place where only the high priest could enter, and only on the Day of Atonement. This chamber has remained empty except for the presence of the invisible God of Israel. Now marble eyes stare from a face that claims divine honors. The violation cuts deeper than physical destruction. It represents spiritual rape of the most sacred space in Jewish consciousness. The altar receives its new sacrifice as pigs replace lambs and bulls. These unclean animals, forbidden to Jewish touch, spill their blood on stones that have known only pure offerings. The smoke that rises carries the stench of defilement instead of the sweet savor that once pleased the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Greek priests perform ceremonies that mock everything Jews hold sacred. They chant hymns to Zeus in the courts where psalms once rose. They pour wine offerings to Olympic gods where Jewish priests offered drink offerings to the one true God. Every gesture reverses centuries of careful ritual developed to honor divine holiness. The date chosen for this desecration holds special significance. Antiochus schedules the Zeus sacrifice for the 25th day of Kislev, which corresponds to his own birthday. He transforms the temple into a monument to his divine pretensions. The building that represented God's presence among his people becomes a shrine to human arrogance. Jewish families throughout Jerusalem hear the sounds of foreign celebration coming from their holy mountain. Children ask their parents why strangers occupy their sacred space. Mothers weep as they explain that wicked men have driven God from his house. Fathers clench their fists and whisper prayers for divine intervention. The psychological trauma extends beyond religious offense to cultural annihilation. The temple served as the center of Jewish identity and meaning. Its destruction would have been terrible, but understandable as wartime casualties. Its transformation into a pagan shrine represents something worse: the deliberate erasure of Jewish existence through mockery and replacement. Reports spread throughout Judea as refugees flee Jerusalem carrying news of the abomination. Rural communities receive the devastating information in fragments that somehow make the reality more horrible. The temple defiled, pigs sacrificed, Zeus installed, Jewish priests forced to participate or die. Each detail adds weight to an already unbearable burden. Some Jews break under the strain of witnessing their deepest beliefs treated as objects of ridicule. Mental collapse accompanies spiritual crisis as the foundations of their world crumble. The God who promised to dwell among his people seems to have abandoned them to enemies who celebrate their victory in his own house. Others respond with rage that burns white-hot beneath careful concealment. They watch the foreign rituals and memorize the faces of collaborators. They count the insults offered to their faith. They dream of the day when accounts might be balanced and justice restored. Their anger becomes a resource they save for future use. The collaborationist priests who participate in the desecration earn particular hatred from their former friends and neighbors. These men chose survival over faithfulness. They serve at the defiled altar and speak Greek prayers to foreign gods. Their betrayal hurts more than enemy violence because it comes from within the community. Economic life around the temple collapses as pilgrims stop coming to Jerusalem. The vendors who sold pure animals for sacrifice have no customers. The craftsmen who made ritual objects find no market for their work. The innkeepers who housed visiting worshippers face empty rooms. Defilement brings material suffering alongside spiritual pain. The festival calendar loses all meaning as Jewish observances become impossible. The daily sacrifices that marked morning and evening prayers cease entirely. The monthly offerings for new moons cannot continue. The annual celebrations that brought joy to Jewish families transform into occasions for mourning the loss of their religious life. International Jewish communities receive news of the temple's desecration with shock and disbelief. Communities in Alexandria, Babylon, and other cities struggle to understand how such a thing could happen. Some send money to help Jerusalem's Jews. Others wonder if God has finally rejected his chosen people for their sins. The prophetic books take on new relevance as Jews search their scriptures for explanation and hope. Daniel's visions of foreign oppression seem to describe their current situation. Jeremiah's warnings about divine judgment resonate with contemporary experience, but the promises of restoration provide comfort that sustains faith through the darkest hours. Underground religious life develops new forms as Jews adapt to impossible circumstances. Private homes become meeting places for prayer and scripture study. Hidden scrolls preserve sacred texts. Whispered conversations replace public worship. Faith continues but changes form to survive systematic persecution. The desecration creates a watershed moment that divides Jewish history into before and after. Previous foreign conquests allowed Jews to maintain their religious practices under foreign political control. This assault targets Jewish faith itself, demanding not just political submission, but spiritual surrender. The stakes escalate beyond anything their ancestors faced. Resistance begins forming in unexpected places as ordinary Jews decide that some things matter more than survival. Farmers, merchants, and craftsmen who never imagined themselves as warriors start asking dangerous questions. How long will God permit this outrage? When might divine deliverance come? What role might faithful Jews play in bringing about justice? The blood on the altar becomes a symbol that will haunt Jewish memory for generations. It represents more than ritual violation. It embodies the deliberate attempt to erase Jewish existence through cultural and religious genocide. But it also becomes a rallying cry for those who refuse to accept defeat. The stain demands cleansing. The wrong cries out for justice. The spark in Modi'in. 20 miles northwest of Jerusalem, the village of Modi'in rests among olive groves and vineyards. Stone houses cluster around a small market square. Farmers tend ancient terraces carved into hillsides. Life moves at the pace of seasons and harvests. This quiet place seems far removed from the turmoil consuming Jerusalem, but distance provides no protection from the king's decrees. Mattathias serves as priest in this rural community. His beard shows white after decades of faithful service. 5 sons work alongside him: Judas the fierce, Jonathan the diplomatic, Simon the wise, John the steady, and Eleazar the passionate. Together they represent everything noble in Jewish tradition: courage, learning, devotion, and uncompromising faith. The old priest watches Jerusalem suffering with growing anguish. Refugees arrive in Modi'in carrying stories of temple desecration and religious persecution. They describe the Zeus statue installed in the holy place. They whisper about priests forced to sacrifice pigs. They weep as they recount the systematic destruction of Jewish life. Royal officials follow the refugees into rural areas, carrying scrolls that extend Antiochus's decrees to every corner of Judea. No village may escape the campaign of forced Hellenization. Local compliance must be demonstrated through public acts of apostasy. Resistance will meet the same violent suppression experienced in Jerusalem. The officials arrive in Modi'in on a morning when mist rises from the valleys. They set up an altar in the village square and announce their requirements. Every Jewish male must come forward and sacrifice to the Greek gods. This public demonstration will prove their rejection of ancestral customs and acceptance of the king's divine authority. Villagers gather reluctantly around the makeshift altar. They recognize the official's authority and fear the consequences of refusal. Stories of executions and torture have preceded this moment. Families whisper anxiously about the price of defiance. Safety lies in compliance, however repugnant the act might feel. The senior official addresses Mattathias directly, recognizing his influence in the community. The priest's cooperation will encourage others to follow his example. Royal favor and financial rewards await those who demonstrate enthusiastic acceptance of the new religious requirements. Opposition brings only suffering and death. Mattathias stands silent as the official explains the simple ceremony required. Light incense to Zeus. Offer a small sacrifice to Antiochus Epiphanes. Speak a few words acknowledging the king's divinity. These actions will satisfy the decree's requirements and allow normal life to resume. Refusal serves no purpose except to invite destruction. The priest looks at the altar with its foreign decorations and pagan symbols. He sees the incense that will carry prayers to false gods. He smells the meat prepared for sacrifice to deities his ancestors never knew. Everything about this moment violates the covenant that has defined his family's existence for generations. I will not obey the king's command, Mattathias declares in a voice that carries across the square. I will not abandon the religion of my fathers, neither I nor my sons will depart from our faith. His words cut through the morning air like a sword drawn from its sheath. The moment of decision has arrived. The official repeats his offer with greater urgency. The priest can still choose safety over destruction. His community depends on his wise leadership. What good will martyrdom accomplish except to bring suffering upon innocent people? Compromise offers a path forward that preserves lives and maintains peace. But Mattathias has passed beyond calculations of advantage and safety. His response comes from depths that political considerations cannot reach. Even if all nations under the king's rule obey him and depart from their ancestral religion, I and my sons and my brothers will live by the covenant of our fathers. A Jewish villager steps forward, perhaps hoping to spare the community from collective punishment. He approaches the altar and reaches for the incense that will demonstrate his compliance with royal commands. This act of individual submission might satisfy the officials and allow others to escape similar pressure. Mattathias sees the man's movement toward the altar, and something breaks inside the old priest's heart. Rage floods through him like fire through dry grass. This fellow Jew will pollute himself and encourage others to follow his example. Apostasy must not succeed through local leadership. Faith demands action beyond words. The priest moves with speed that surprises everyone present. His hand finds a knife at his belt. He strikes down the would-be apostate before the man can complete his sacrifice. Blood stains the stones around the alien altar. The line between submission and resistance has been crossed with violence. Mattathias turns toward the royal official with the same weapon still bloody in his hand. This representative of tyranny has brought defilement to a peaceful community. He has demanded that faithful Jews choose between their God and their lives. His presence represents everything that threatens Jewish survival. The official falls beneath the priest's assault, his formal robe spreading around him like spilled wine. The scrolls containing royal decrees scatter in the morning breeze. The altar built for pagan sacrifice overturns under the weight of falling bodies. The careful ceremony of forced apostasy dissolves into chaos and bloodshed. Mattathias stands over the two bodies with his weapon raised high. His voice carries to every corner of the square as he issues a call that will echo through Jewish history. Let everyone who is zealous for the law and supports the covenant come out with me. The rebellion against Antiochus IV has begun. His 5 sons move to their father's side without hesitation. Other villagers follow their example, choosing immediate danger over slow spiritual death. They abandon their homes and possessions, taking only weapons and determination. The price of faithfulness has become clear, and they accept it willingly. The group flees toward the Judean wilderness, where hills and caves offer hiding places from royal pursuit. Behind them, Modian burns as news of the priest's defiance reaches enemy ears. But the spark has been struck. The fire of resistance spreads beyond one village to kindle hopes throughout occupied Judea. Into the wilderness. The hills southwest of Jerusalem rise like broken teeth against the sky. Limestone cliffs shelter hidden valleys where springs bubble from rock faces. Caves pierce the mountainsides, offering refuge to those who know their secrets. This wilderness becomes home to Mattathias and his growing band of rebels who choose exile over apostasy. The initial flight from Modi'in brings chaos and uncertainty. Families abandon centuries-old homes with only what they can carry. Children weep for toys left behind. Women worry about elderly parents who cannot make the journey. Men calculate how long their food supplies might last in hostile territory. But the wilderness offers unexpected advantages to those fighting an empire. Roman roads serve imperial armies that depend on supply lines and organized camps. Guerrilla fighters who know every goat path and water source can strike without warning and disappear before reinforcements arrive. The land itself becomes their ally against foreign oppression. Mattathias establishes leadership over the disparate groups that join his cause. City dwellers who fled Jerusalem bring different skills than village farmers. Scribes who saved Torah portions contribute knowledge while blacksmiths provide weapon repair. The old priest must forge these diverse elements into an effective fighting force. Religious observance continues despite the harsh conditions. Prayers rise from hidden camps at dawn and dusk. Sabbath rest is observed even when enemies patrol nearby valleys. Dietary laws govern meal preparation despite limited food options. The rebels fight for their faith, and their faith sustains their fighting. Training begins immediately as volunteers learn combat skills they never expected to need. Farmers practice sword techniques between rocks. Merchants learn to move silently through brush without breaking twigs. Scribes discover muscles they never knew they possessed. The transformation from peaceful citizens to guerrilla fighters happens faster than anyone imagines possible. Weapons prove scarce in the early days. Agricultural tools become improvised arms. Scythes sharpen into deadly blades. Shepherd's staffs serve as clubs. Hunting bows provide long-range capability. But these makeshift weapons cannot match the professional equipment carried by Seleucid soldiers. Recruitment expands as word spreads through Judean villages about the priest who chose resistance over submission. Young men slip away from their families to join the rebellion. Refugees from Jerusalem bring skills and determination. Even some priests abandon their compromised positions to serve God in the wilderness. The group develops its own identity distinct from the comfortable Judaism of temple and synagogue. These rebels call themselves the Hasidim, the pious ones who refuse to compromise with evil. Their Judaism becomes active and militant rather than passive and accommodating. Faith expresses itself through warfare rather than ritual observance alone. Mattathias divides his followers into small units that can move independently while maintaining communication. Large groups attract unwanted attention and require more resources than the wilderness can provide. Smaller bands can live off the land while conducting hit-and-run operations against enemy positions. Intelligence networks develop as sympathetic villagers provide information about Seleucid troop movements. Farmers report which roads carry supply convoys. Merchants observe garrison strengths in different towns. Women gather information from enemy soldiers who underestimate their significance. Knowledge becomes as important as weapons. The rebels discover that their enemies include fellow Jews who collaborate with the occupation forces. These apostates serve as guides for Seleucid punitive expeditions. They identify hiding places and betray resistance sympathizers. The civil war aspect of the conflict creates bitter divisions that will outlast the foreign occupation. Winter brings severe challenges to the wilderness camps. Mountain temperatures drop below freezing. Food becomes scarce as game grows wary, and stored supplies dwindle. Some rebels question whether survival is possible under such harsh conditions. The movement faces its first major test of endurance. Mattathias himself grows ill during the cold months. The elderly priest's strength fails under the strain of outdoor living and constant stress. His sons recognize that leadership must pass to the next generation if the rebellion is to continue. The question becomes which brother can best serve the cause. Before his death, Mattathias gathers his sons and provides his final guidance. He designates Simon as counselor for his wisdom and political judgment, but he names Judas as military commander, recognizing the fierce determination that burns within his third son. The old priest dies knowing that capable hands will continue his work. The transition of leadership happens smoothly as the brothers accept their father's decision without rivalry. Judas assumes command with his siblings' full support. This unity strengthens the movement at a crucial moment when division might have destroyed everything Mattathias built. Judas brings different qualities than his father possessed. Where Mattathias provided moral authority and religious inspiration, Judas contributes tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency. The rebellion transforms from a desperate flight into an organized military campaign under his direction. The new commander reorganizes the forces along more professional lines. He establishes training standards that turn farmers into soldiers. He develops communication systems that coordinate multiple operations. He creates supply networks that reduce dependence on wilderness resources. The amateur rebellion begins evolving into a serious military threat. Weapons acquisition becomes a priority as Judas plans more ambitious operations. Raids on isolated outposts provide captured equipment. Sympathetic metalworkers fashion crude but effective blades. Trading networks acquire military supplies from distant markets. The rebels gradually arm themselves for conventional warfare. The nickname Maccabees attaches itself to Judas during this period, though its exact meaning remains debated. Some claim it means hammer, in reference to his crushing blows against enemies. Others suggest it represents an acronym for Who is like you among the gods, O Lord? Whatever its origin, the name becomes synonymous with Jewish resistance. Morale improves as successful raids demonstrate that the Seleucid forces are not invincible. Small victories build confidence for larger operations. Each captured weapon encourages further recruitment. Every rescued Torah scroll proves that Jewish culture can survive systematic persecution. Hope replaces despair in the wilderness camps. The religious dimension of the struggle intensifies under Judas's leadership. This becomes more than a political rebellion against foreign occupation. It represents a holy war to preserve God's covenant with his chosen people. Divine favor appears to bless their efforts through unexpected victories and miraculous escapes. Regional support grows as rural communities provide food, shelter, and information to the rebels. Farmers hide supplies in their fields. Shepherds guide rebels through secret paths. Village elders coordinate resistance activities. The movement spreads beyond its wilderness base into the broader Jewish population. Seleucid authorities recognize the growing threat and begin organizing serious military responses. Professional troops replace local garrison forces. Experienced commanders arrive from other parts of the empire. Intelligence operations attempt to penetrate the rebel networks. The conflict escalates beyond local policing to regional warfare. But the rebels have used their time well. They possess detailed knowledge of local terrain. They enjoy popular support from the Jewish population. They fight with desperate courage born of religious conviction. Most importantly, they have learned to think and act as guerrilla fighters rather than conventional soldiers. The wilderness that once seemed like exile becomes their greatest advantage. Every cave offers a potential ambush site. Every hill provides observation of enemy movements. Every village contains friends who will shelter fighters and mislead pursuers. The land itself fights alongside the rebels against foreign invasion. As the first year of rebellion draws to a close, the movement has survived its initial trials and established itself as a permanent threat to Seleucid control. The priest's spark has become a flame that spreads throughout Judea. The real war is about to begin. The hammer rises. Judas Maccabeus emerges from his father's shadow like dawn breaking over the Judean hills. Where Mattathias provided spiritual inspiration, his son brings tactical genius and ruthless determination. The rebels who once struggled for survival now threaten to drive foreign occupiers from their ancient homeland. Leadership has passed to hands that understand war as well as worship. The new commander possesses physical presence that commands immediate respect. His strength shows in shoulders broadened by weapons training and eyes hardened by constant vigilance. When Judas speaks, seasoned fighters listen. When he moves, others follow without question. The wilderness has forged him into something between prophet and predator. But appearance alone cannot explain his influence over desperate men facing overwhelming odds. Judas combines religious passion with practical intelligence in ways that inspire absolute loyalty. He quotes scripture during strategy sessions. He prays before battles. He treats each victory as divine gift and each setback as test of faith. The rebels under his command transform from refugees into professional soldiers. Daily training replaces random activity. Strict discipline governs camp life. Supply systems provide reliable equipment and food. What began as desperate flight evolves into organized military campaign with clear objectives and consistent methods. Judas studies his enemies with the intensity of a scholar examining sacred texts. He learns their patrol schedules and supply routes. He identifies their tactical preferences and command structures. He recognizes their strengths and exploits their weaknesses. Knowledge becomes his most effective weapon against superior numbers and equipment. The nickname Maccabees spreads throughout Judea as stories of his exploits reach Jewish communities still under foreign occupation. Some claim the name means hammer for the crushing blows he delivers against enemy forces. Others interpret it as extinguisher for his ability to snuff out Seleucid outposts like candle flames. His brothers serve as trusted lieutenants who extend his influence throughout the rebel organization. Jonathan handles diplomatic contacts with sympathetic groups. Simon manages logistics and intelligence gathering. Eleazar leads special operations requiring particular daring. John coordinates regional activities. Family unity strengthens military effectiveness. The commander develops new tactics suited to guerrilla warfare in mountainous terrain. Small forces attack larger enemies at carefully chosen times and places. Lightning strikes disable enemy communications before reinforcements can respond. Ambushes target supply convoys and isolated garrisons rather than major fortifications. Each successful operation builds momentum for the next engagement. Captured weapons arm additional recruits. Rescued prisoners provide valuable intelligence. Liberated communities offer bases for future operations. Victory feeds upon itself as more Jews believe that resistance might actually succeed. Religious motivation distinguishes Judas's forces from ordinary rebels seeking political advantage. These fighters see themselves as instruments of divine justice, rather than merely human opponents of foreign rule. Their cause connects them to Abraham's covenant and Moses' law. Death in battle means martyrdom rather than mere casualty. The commander carefully balances military necessity with religious obligations. Sabbath observance continues even during active campaigns. Dietary laws govern meal preparation despite field conditions. Prayer services mark daily rhythms alongside tactical planning. The rebels fight for their faith while their faith sustains their fighting. Intelligence networks expand as Jewish communities throughout Judea provide information about enemy activities. Merchants report troop movements during their travels. Farmers observe garrison rotations from their fields. Women gather details from conversations with unwary soldiers. The entire population becomes eyes and ears for the resistance. Weapons gradually improve as successful raids provide better equipment than improvised agricultural tools. Captured Seleucid armor protects rebel fighters. Professional swords replace homemade blades. Military bows offer greater range and accuracy than hunting weapons. The rebels begin matching their enemies in equipment quality, if not quantity. Morale reaches levels that surprise even Judas himself. Men who once cowered before royal officials now charge professional soldiers with wild courage. Farmers who never handled weapons beyond pruning hooks wield war spears with deadly skill. The transformation amazes observers and terrifies enemies. The commander's reputation grows beyond Jewish communities as Seleucid officials struggle to explain their repeated failures against supposedly inferior opponents. Reports describe a leader who appears and disappears like morning mist. Some claim he possesses supernatural powers granted by his God. Others credit exceptional military training. Training programs intensify as Judas prepares his forces for larger operations against stronger opposition. Individual combat skills improve through constant practice. Unit coordination develops through repeated exercises. Communication systems enable complex maneuvers. The amateur rebellion matures into professional military organization. Regional support expands as success breeds confidence among previously neutral populations. Communities that once submitted passively to foreign demands begin providing active assistance to rebel operations. The movement spreads beyond its wilderness origins into towns and villages throughout central Judea. Seleucid authorities recognize that local forces cannot contain this growing threat. Professional military units deploy from other regions to reinforce demoralized garrisons. Experienced commanders replace officials who failed to suppress the rebellion. The conflict escalates from policing action to serious warfare. But escalation works both ways as Judas adapts his tactics to match increasing enemy pressure. Larger operations require more sophisticated planning and coordination. Multiple simultaneous attacks stretch enemy resources across broader areas. The rebellion grows more ambitious as it grows more capable. The commander begins considering operations beyond hit-and-run raids against isolated targets. Major enemy positions might be vulnerable to determined assault. Important towns could be liberated and held rather than merely raided. The transition from guerrilla harassment to conventional warfare becomes increasingly attractive. Religious festivals take on new meaning as opportunities for military action. Jewish holidays that once brought people together for worship now serve as occasions for coordinated resistance activities. The calendar of faith becomes a schedule for liberation as the sacred and martial blend into unified purpose. Personal legend grows around Judas as stories circulate about his courage and tactical brilliance. Some tales stretch truth beyond recognition, but they serve important purposes in building morale and attracting recruits. The man becomes symbol of Jewish resistance that transcends individual limitations. As the second year of rebellion begins, Judas Maccabeus has established himself as more than successful guerrilla leader. He represents the possibility that faith and determination might overcome empire and oppression. The hammer is ready to strike its most decisive blows. Shock and awe, guerrilla warfare in Judea. The mountains of Judea become a classroom where desperate Jews learn lessons their ancestors never imagined needing. Traditional warfare pits army against army in open battle where numbers and equipment determine victory. But guerrilla fighting requires different skills: patience instead of courage, cunning instead of strength, surprise instead of honor. Judas Maccabeus proves himself master of this deadly art. Dawn breaks over a Seleucid supply convoy winding through narrow valleys toward Jerusalem. Soldiers march in loose formation, confident that their superior weapons and training protect them from local threats. Pack animals carry food, weapons, and gold needed to maintain the occupation forces. Guards scan the hillsides but see only empty rocks and scrub brush. The ambush begins with arrows from multiple directions. Rebel archers hidden among the stones target officers first, creating confusion in the ranks. Before the soldiers can organize a response, fighters with swords and spears charge from concealed positions. The attack lasts minutes, not hours. When it ends, the convoy has vanished and the rebels melt back into the wilderness. This pattern repeats throughout central Judea as Judas applies lessons learned during months of careful observation. Small enemy forces face annihilation. Large groups find their movements predicted and their objectives frustrated. Supply lines become death traps. Garrison duty transforms into nerve-wracking imprisonment within fortified walls. The psychological impact exceeds the physical damage as Seleucid morale crumbles under constant harassment. Soldiers never know when the next attack might come. Every patrol could become a massacre. Every mission might end in ambush. The rebels create an atmosphere of fear that undermines enemy effectiveness more completely than direct assault. Communication systems collapse as messengers disappear between stations. Orders fail to reach their destinations. Intelligence reports never arrive at headquarters. Commanders operate blindly while their opponents seem to know their every plan. The rebels control information flow despite lacking formal military structure. Local populations provide crucial support that makes guerrilla operations possible. Farmers hide weapons in their grain stores. Shepherds guide fighters along secret paths. Village women prepare food for rebel units while misleading enemy patrols. The entire countryside becomes hostile territory for foreign occupiers. Judas develops specific techniques adapted to local terrain and enemy weaknesses. Night attacks exploit superior Jewish knowledge of familiar ground. False retreats draw pursuers into carefully prepared killing zones. Multiple simultaneous raids force enemies to divide their already inadequate forces. Each innovation increases rebel effectiveness. The rebels learn to fight like their environment, adaptable, patient, and deadly when opportunity arises. They avoid direct confrontation with superior forces while striking vulnerable targets without mercy. Supply depots burn. Isolated garrisons fall. Collaborators disappear in the darkness. Fear spreads faster than military response. Captured equipment gradually improves rebel capabilities as successful raids provide professional weapons and armor. Seleucid swords replace crude farming tools. Military shields protect fighters who once faced battle with wooden boards. Each victory arms the rebels for larger operations while disarming their enemies. Intelligence gathering becomes sophisticated as networks of sympathizers provide detailed information about enemy activities. Merchants report which roads carry valuable convoys. Servants in official households overhear planning discussions. Temple workers observe garrison routines. The rebels know enemy intentions before the enemies act. Religious motivation sustains fighters through hardships that would break ordinary soldiers. These men believe they fight for God's honor as well as their own freedom. Every fallen enemy represents divine justice. Every victory proves heavenly favor. Death in battle guarantees eternal reward. Faith becomes their ultimate weapon. Training intensifies as raw recruits learn skills needed for survival in mountain warfare. City dwellers develop endurance for long marches over rough terrain. Farmers master combat techniques beyond their agricultural experience. Scholars learn to move silently and strike without warning. The rebellion transforms ordinary Jews into effective warriors. The enemy response grows more desperate as conventional tactics fail against unconventional opponents. Brutal reprisals against Jewish civilians aim to eliminate rebel support. Collective punishments target entire communities suspected of collaboration. But these measures strengthen resistance rather than weakening it. Judas carefully selects targets that maximize impact while minimizing risk to his forces. Treasury convoys provide both wealth and weapons. Supply columns feeding enemy garrisons create shortages in occupied towns. Communication lines between major cities isolate commanders from their superiors. Strategic thinking guides tactical execution. The rebels develop their own communication networks that outperform official Seleucid systems. Signal fires from hilltop to hilltop carry messages faster than mounted messengers. Hidden caches store supplies and information. Safe houses provide rest and planning facilities. The guerrilla infrastructure grows more effective than imperial administration. Weather becomes an ally as rebels who know local conditions exploit seasonal advantages. Rain conceals movement and muffles sound. Fog provides natural camouflage for surprise attacks. Wind direction affects arrow accuracy and fire spread. The fighters use every natural advantage against their enemies. Capture and interrogation provide valuable intelligence about enemy plans and weaknesses. Prisoners reveal supply schedules and patrol routes. Deserters describe morale problems and leadership conflicts. Documents found on bodies detail strategic objectives and tactical procedures. Knowledge compounds with each successful operation. The psychological warfare extends beyond direct military action as the rebels create legend around their activities. Stories of supernatural protection spread through enemy ranks. Tales of impossible escapes demoralize pursuers. Reports of divine favor encourage Jewish supporters while terrifying pagan opponents. Reputation becomes reality. Medical care improves as captured supplies include professional equipment and medicines. Wounded fighters receive better treatment than they could expect in peacetime. Survival rates increase, maintaining experienced personnel for future operations. The rebellion develops its own support systems independent of conventional society. Regional coordination expands as successful units inspire similar activities throughout Judea. Multiple groups operate simultaneously in different areas, timing attacks to stretch enemy resources beyond their limits. The movement spreads beyond central control while maintaining common purpose and methods. As months pass, the guerrilla campaign achieves objectives that seemed impossible when it began. Enemy control weakens throughout rural Judea. Jewish communities regain confidence in their ability to resist oppression. The rebellion grows from desperate survival attempt into genuine liberation movement. The tide of war begins turning in unexpected directions. The Battle of Emmaus. The spring of 166 brings rumors that chill rebel camps throughout the Judean wilderness. Antiochus has dispatched a proper army to crush the Jewish uprising once and for all. No more garrison troops or local militias. This force includes professional soldiers commanded by experienced generals who have conquered provinces and subdued rebellions across the Seleucid Empire. Gorgias and Nicanor marched south from Antioch with 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry. These numbers dwarf anything Judas can field against them, but size alone does not tell the complete story. These troops represent the finest military tradition of Alexander's successors, trained in formations that once conquered the known world. The army establishes its base at Emmaus, a strategic location that controls access to Jerusalem from the coastal plain. From this position, they can strike at rebel strongholds while protecting their own supply lines. The commanders expect to end Jewish resistance through a series of coordinated attacks that will trap the rebels between converging forces. Slave traders follow the army with chains and cages, confident that victory will provide abundant human merchandise. They have already negotiated prices for Jewish captives with buyers throughout the eastern Mediterranean. This commercial speculation reveals how completely the Seleucids expect to destroy all resistance and sell the survivors into bondage. Judas faces the greatest challenge of his military career as reports arrive describing enemy strength and equipment. His 3,000 fighters seem pathetically inadequate against such overwhelming force. Many of his men have never participated in conventional battle. Their experience consists entirely of ambushes and raids against smaller targets. The rebel commander calls his forces together for a council of war that will determine whether the rebellion continues or dies at Emmaus. Some advisors counsel retreat deeper into the wilderness where large enemy formations cannot follow. Others suggest abandoning conventional battle entirely and returning to pure guerrilla tactics. But Judas recognizes that this moment offers opportunity as well as danger. Victory over a major enemy army will prove that divine favor supports Jewish resistance. Defeat means the end of all hope for liberation. The stakes could not be higher, but the potential rewards justify enormous risks. He addresses his assembled fighters with words that echo through Jewish memory. It is better for us to die in battle than to see the misfortunes of our nation and our sanctuary. The speech transforms fear into determination as men prepare to risk everything for faith and freedom. The tactical plan Judas develops relies on surprise and superior knowledge of local terrain. While the enemy expects him to defend his mountain strongholds, he will attack their base camp when they least expect assault. The larger force becomes vulnerable precisely because of its size and confidence. Religious preparation accompanies military planning as the rebels fast and pray before battle. They read from Torah scrolls rescued from burning synagogues. They confess sins and seek divine forgiveness. They dedicate themselves to God's service regardless of personal outcome. Spiritual armor proves as important as physical protection. The march toward Emmaus begins under cover of darkness as 3,000 Jewish fighters move silently through familiar hills. They avoid main roads and known patrol routes. Local guides lead them along paths invisible to foreign eyes. The night conceals movement that daylight would make impossible. Dawn reveals the rebel force positioned on heights overlooking the enemy camp. Below them, Seleucid soldiers conduct morning routines with casual confidence. No sentries scan the hills with particular attention. No preparations suggest awareness of impending attack. Surprise remains complete. Judas divides his force into 4 groups that will assault the camp from different directions simultaneously. This coordination requires precise timing and clear signals. Any premature movement will alert the enemy and destroy the plan's effectiveness. Everything depends on disciplined execution of complex maneuvers. The battle cry, the help of God, echoes across the valley as Jewish fighters charge down the slopes toward enemy positions. Terror replaces confidence in Seleucid ranks as soldiers struggle to understand how enemies have appeared where none should exist. Confusion becomes panic as organized resistance collapses. The assault succeeds beyond all reasonable expectations as professional soldiers flee before farmers and craftsmen inspired by religious fury. Captured standards become trophies of divine favor. Abandoned weapons arm additional rebels. The camp's treasury provides resources for expanded operations. Gorgias himself escapes with a remnant of his force, but his army effectively ceases to exist as an organized threat. The survivors carry news of catastrophic defeat back to Antioch, where officials struggle to explain how their finest troops could fall to untrained rebels fighting with improvised equipment. The psychological impact exceeds even the material victory, as word spreads throughout Judea that the mighty Seleucid army has suffered crushing defeat. Jewish communities that submitted to foreign rule from fear begin reconsidering their positions. The rebellion suddenly appears capable of achieving complete liberation. Captured documents reveal the extent of enemy planning and the confidence with which they approached this campaign. Maps show intended occupation zones. Orders detail plans for mass deportations. Supply lists include chains for enslaving prisoners. The rebels realize how narrowly they have escaped complete destruction. The slave traders who followed the army expecting profitable business instead find themselves fleeing for their lives. Their wagons and chains become symbols of defeated arrogance. Some rebels suggest keeping the chains as reminders of what foreign rule means for Jewish survival. Religious significance accompanies military success as the fighters recognize divine intervention in their victory. 3,000 Jews have defeated 40,000 professional soldiers through heaven's assistance. This miracle proves that their cause enjoys supernatural support despite earthly disadvantages. The battle transforms Judas from guerrilla leader into legendary figure whose name spreads beyond Judea. Enemy commanders study his tactics while allied forces seek to imitate his methods. The victory at Emmaus establishes him as military genius capable of achieving impossible objectives. Strategic consequences flow from tactical success as the rebellion gains credibility among previously neutral populations. Cities that remained loyal to Seleucid authority begin questioning whether resistance might succeed. The balance of power shifts in ways that will reshape the entire conflict. But Judas remains cautious despite overwhelming victory. One battle does not end a war. The enemy will return with different tactics and greater determination. The rebels must use their success wisely to prepare for larger challenges that lie ahead. The celebration in rebel camps mingles joy with reverence as fighters offer thanks for divine protection. Captured wealth will fund expanded operations. Seized weapons will arm new recruits. Most importantly, proven victory will inspire continued resistance throughout the Jewish homeland. Emmaus becomes more than military triumph. It represents the moment when desperate rebellion transformed into viable liberation movement. The hammer has struck its most decisive blow, and the empire trembles from the impact. Jerusalem in chains, the sound of sandals echoes through empty streets. Jerusalem awakens to an impossible sight. Maccabee banners flutter where Seleucid eagles once perched. The city that seemed lost forever now breathes free air again. Judas stands at the gates, dust still clinging to his beard from the march. His fighters pour through the ancient stones like water finding its course. More than a military victory, this moment carries the weight of prophecy fulfilled. Beyond the tactical triumph lies something deeper, the return of God's people to God's city. The liberation unfolds in stages. First comes the outer districts, where sympathizers emerge from hiding. Shopkeepers who once whispered prayers behind closed doors now sing them openly. Children who had never seen a Jewish festival watch in wonder as their parents dance. Yet shadows linger. The Acra fortress looms above the Temple Mount like a dark crown. Seleucid soldiers peer down from its walls, their spears glinting in the morning sun. The fortress holds the high ground, supplied by secret tunnels. Its garrison remains loyal to Antiochus, a thorn embedded deep in Jerusalem's heart. Judas surveys the stronghold with calculating eyes. Taking the fortress would require a siege. Siege warfare demands time, resources, and patience. The Maccabees possess none of these luxuries. Enemy reinforcements march from the north. Every day spent in siege brings fresh dangers. The practical choice becomes clear. Leave the fortress for later. Focus on what matters most, the temple itself. The temple courts stretch before them like a battlefield of faith. Weeds push through cracked stones. Greek statues stand where holy vessels once gleamed. The altar bears stains no priest should witness. Zeus's image towers over sacred space, its marble eyes cold and mocking. Old priests emerge from hiding, their faces etched with years of grief. They touch broken columns with trembling fingers. Some weep openly. Others stand in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the scope of desecration. Judas gathers his commanders around the defiled altar. His voice carries across the courtyard, firm but gentle. The work begins immediately. Every trace of foreign worship must disappear. Every stone that touched pagan sacrifice needs replacement. The temple will rise again, pure and whole. Teams form spontaneously. Some fighters tear down offensive images. Others search for hidden sacred objects. Women arrive with brooms and buckets, ready to scrub away years of neglect. The city's artisans offer their skills freely. Days blur into weeks of labor. New stones arrive from ancient quarries. Metalworkers forge fresh vessels in patterns their grandfathers remembered. Weavers create new curtains using techniques passed down in whispers. The work transforms more than buildings. Men who lived as guerrillas now act as builders. Hands that gripped swords now shape sacred space. The rebellion's violent phase gives way to something gentler, the patient work of restoration. Resistance appears in unexpected forms. Some Jerusalem residents fear Seleucid return. They whisper warnings about divine punishment. Others question Judas's authority to cleanse the temple. Traditional hierarchies demand proper procedures, proper permissions. Judas responds with quiet determination. God's house needs no human permission to be restored. The work continues despite doubts and fears. Each day brings the temple closer to its original glory. Word spreads beyond Jerusalem's walls. Jews from distant villages make pilgrimage to witness the miracle. They bring offerings, stories, and hope. The temple's restoration becomes a beacon drawing scattered people home. The Accra's garrison watches nervously. Their supplies run lower each week. Local support evaporates as temple work progresses. The fortress becomes an island of foreign power in a sea of Jewish renewal. Judas makes a crucial decision. The fortress can wait. The temple cannot. More than tactical wisdom, this choice reflects spiritual priorities. Buildings can be conquered later. Sacred space demands immediate attention. The restored temple begins to take shape. Clean stones replace defiled ones. New bronze vessels gleam where broken pottery once scattered. The altar rises fresh and unmarked, ready for proper sacrifice. Jerusalem transforms around its healing heart. Markets reopen with familiar sounds and smells. Schools resume teaching Torah instead of Greek philosophy. The city remembers its true identity. Yet, challenges multiply. Seleucid armies gather beyond the hills. Hostile neighbors sharpen their weapons. The Accra fortress maintains its threatening presence. Victory brings new vulnerabilities alongside its blessings. Judas walks the temple courts each evening, checking progress and offering encouragement. His presence reassures workers and pilgrims alike. More than a military commander, he becomes the guardian of a sacred restoration. The moon waxes full above Jerusalem's ancient walls. Temple courts echo with hammer blows and prayers. The city sleeps peacefully for the first time in years, protected by faith and determination. Morning approaches with promise of completion. The temple stands nearly ready for rededication. Jerusalem holds its breath, waiting for the moment when holiness returns to its proper home. The oil, the light, the legend. Priests gather in the pre-dawn darkness. Their white robes flutter like spirits in the temple courts. Today marks the culmination of months of careful restoration. The temple stands ready for its return to sacred service. Judas watches from the eastern gate as holy men prepare for rededication. His warriors stand guard at every entrance, their weapons ready but spirits calm. This day belongs to prayer, not warfare. Violence yields to reverence. The ceremony requires specific elements: pure oil for the eternal flame, unblemished animals for sacrifice, sacred vessels crafted according to ancient patterns. Each item carries deep meaning, connecting present hope to ancient promise. High Priest Onias steps forward, his aged hands steady despite years of exile. His voice trembles with emotion as he begins the purification prayers. Words his father taught him decades ago now echo through restored halls. The oil presents an immediate problem. True consecrated oil requires preparation time. Olives must be pressed under strict conditions. The liquid needs blessing by proper authorities. Every step follows traditions older than memory. Searchers comb storage chambers for any surviving sacred oil. Most containers lie broken or contaminated. Foreign soldiers showed no respect for holy substances during their occupation. Hope fades with each empty vessel discovered. A young priest calls out from a hidden chamber. His voice carries excitement and awe. Deep within the temple's foundations, beneath layers of debris, sits a single clay jar. Its seal remains intact after years of abandonment. Careful hands lift the precious container. The seal bears proper markings, the high priest's ancient symbol pressed in pure wax. Inside, golden oil catches the morning light like liquid sunshine. Enough remains for one day's burning, perhaps less. The priests exchange worried glances. One day's oil cannot sustain the eternal flame. Tradition requires continuous burning once the dedication begins. To let the flame die would signal divine displeasure. Judas approaches the worried holy men. His voice carries quiet confidence born of battlefield experience. Begin the ceremony anyway, he counsels. God, who granted military victory, will provide for spiritual needs as well. The rededication commences despite limited resources. Trumpets sound across Jerusalem, calling faithful Jews to witness their temple's rebirth. People stream through the gates, faces bright with anticipation. Onias pours the precious oil into the great menorah's central lamp. The wick catches flame immediately, burning bright and steady. Light spreads to adjoining branches, illuminating the holy space with warm radiance. Prayers rise like incense through the morning air. Voices join in ancient songs not heard for 3 years. Children learn melodies their parents hummed in secret. The temple remembers its purpose. Sacrifices begin according to proper ritual. Smoke rises from the restored altar, carrying prayers heavenward. The scent of burning offerings mingles with frankincense and myrrh. Sacred fragrance fills every corner. Hours pass in joyful worship. Noon arrives with continued celebration. The oil burns steadily despite calculations suggesting depletion. Afternoon prayers proceed without dimming flames. Evening approaches with growing wonder. The single day's supply continues burning bright. Night falls, but the menorah's light never wavers. Stars emerge overhead while temple flames dance below. Day follows night in miraculous succession. The oil that should have lasted mere hours burns on through the second dawn. Priests check fuel levels repeatedly, finding no explanation for the phenomenon. News spreads rapidly through Jerusalem and beyond. The temple oil burns without renewal. God's presence manifests through sustained flame. Pilgrims arrive hourly to witness the wonder. 5 days pass with undiminished light. 6 days. 7. Each morning brings fresh amazement as the impossible continues. The menorah burns as if fueled by divine will rather than earthly oil. 8 full days of burning exhaust the miraculous supply. New consecrated oil arrives just as the original jar empties. The eternal flame transfers smoothly from miracle to provision. God's timing proves perfect once again. The 8-day wonder becomes immediate legend. Children repeat the story to younger siblings. Adults write accounts for distant relatives. The miracle takes root in Jewish memory like seeds in fertile ground. Judas proclaims an annual celebration. 8 days each winter will commemorate the temple's rededication and the oil's miracle. Lights will shine in every Jewish home, remembering God's faithfulness in dark times. The festival receives a name drawn from dedication itself, Hanukkah. Families will gather yearly to kindle lights, tell stories, and feast together. The celebration will honor both military victory and spiritual renewal. Generations pass the tradition forward. The story grows richer with each telling. Historical details blend with spiritual meaning. The miracle transcends its original moment to become timeless truth. Far beyond Jerusalem's walls, Jewish communities adopt the new festival. Diaspora synagogues kindle their own Hanukkah lights. The temple's rededication touches hearts across the ancient world. The oil's 8-day burning accomplishes more than practical need. It transforms military triumph into spiritual celebration. God's people learn to find the sacred within the temporal, the eternal within the momentary. Winter nights grow brighter each year as Hanukkah lights multiply. Children learn prayers their ancestors spoke in the temple courts. The miracle continues through memory and tradition. Judas walks the temple courts on quiet evenings, watching flames dance in eternal rhythm. More than warrior or liberator, he becomes guardian of a story that will outlive empires and kingdoms. The light burns on year after year, generation after generation. What began as desperate need becomes eternal celebration. God's faithfulness shines through darkness across all time. Revenge and retaliation, Jerusalem's lights burn bright, but darkness gathers beyond the city walls. The temple's rededication brings joy to faithful hearts. Yet Judas knows celebration must yield to hard realities. Enemies sharpen their swords while Jews kindle their lamps. Victory creates new problems. Neighboring peoples watch Jerusalem's resurgence with growing alarm. For years, they've encroached on Jewish lands. They've enslaved Jewish families and seized property. Now the Maccabees' strength threatens their ill-gotten gains. Messages arrive daily from outlying communities. Jewish farmers in Galilee face harassment from Greek settlers. Merchants in Gilead suffer attacks on trade routes. Families in the Golan Heights send desperate pleas for protection. Judas gathers his commanders in the temple's restored chambers. Maps spread across ancient tables show Jewish settlements scattered like islands in hostile seas. Each community needs defense. Each threat demands response. The situation extends beyond external enemies. Some Jews chose collaboration during the persecution. They informed on neighbors to curry favor with authorities. They participated in pagan rituals to protect their positions. Their choices brought suffering to the faithful. Justice presents complex challenges. Simple revenge would stain the temple's purity. Yet allowing betrayal to go unpunished invites future treachery. The balance between mercy and accountability weighs heavily on Judas's conscience. His first campaign targets immediate threats. Idumean raiders have been attacking Jewish villages south of Hebron. They strike at harvest time, stealing grain and taking captives. Their boldness increases with each successful raid. Judas leads a lightning strike into Idumean territory. His forces move like desert wind, swift and unexpected. They hit the raiders' main camp before dawn, scattering enemies and freeing prisoners. Justice comes swiftly to those who prey on the innocent. The campaign moves northward to Galilee. Greek settlers there have formed private armies. They terrorize Jewish farmers and burn synagogues. Local authorities offer no protection, claiming jurisdictional confusion. Battle follows battle across Galilee's hills. Judas's veterans teach harsh lessons to those who mistake Jewish mercy for weakness. Villages that welcome persecution face consequences. Towns that harbored enemies find their walls breached. Yet the campaign reveals troubling patterns. Victory breeds appetite for more victory. Soldiers who once fought for survival now fight for domination. The pure cause of religious freedom mingles with darker motives. Some commanders push for complete conquest. Why stop at defense? Why not claim all lands once held by Jewish kings? Ancient borders could be restored through force of arms. The kingdom of David might rise again. Judas wrestles with these temptations. Military success opens possibilities his father never imagined. Mattathias dreamed of religious freedom. His son now contemplates political empire. The line between liberation and conquest blurs with each victory. Collaborators face particular scrutiny. Those who aided persecution cannot simply resume normal lives. Their betrayal helped fuel the temple's desecration. Their cooperation enabled the oppression of the faithful. Some receive formal trials in synagogue courts. Witnesses testify about specific acts of collaboration. Evidence is weighed carefully according to traditional law. Punishments range from fines to exile based on the severity of offenses. Others face rougher justice in village squares. Angry crowds remember which neighbors informed on them. Stones fly before judges can intervene. The line between justice and vengeance dissolves in heat of passion. Judas struggles to maintain order and principle. He issues proclamations about proper legal procedures. He posts guards to protect unpopular defendants. Yet his authority cannot reach every village or control every mob. The Eastern Campaign presents new challenges. Jews beyond the Jordan River face systematic persecution from Greek cities. Damascus and Philadelphia coordinate attacks on Jewish settlements. Refugee streams flow westward with tales of horror. Jonathan volunteers to lead the Trans-Jordan expedition. Judas's younger brother has proven himself in several battles. His diplomatic skills complement military abilities. The mission requires both warfare and statecraft. Meanwhile, Simon takes forces southward toward Egypt. Ptolemaic officials there have been harassing Jewish merchants. Trade routes need security. Economic warfare threatens Jewish prosperity as much as military attacks. The brothers' campaigns succeed brilliantly. Jonathan crushes Greek forces beyond the Jordan and establishes Jewish authority throughout the region. Simon secures southern trade routes and negotiates favorable treaties with Egyptian officials. Yet success carries hidden costs. The Maccabees now control territory far beyond Judea's traditional borders. They govern diverse populations with conflicting loyalties. Administrative challenges multiply faster than military victories. Local peoples resent Jewish rule regardless of its justice or mercy. Greeks remember their former dominance. Syrians plot return to power. Even some Jews question the brothers' expanding ambitions. Seleucid attention inevitably returns to the growing Jewish state. Antiochus may be dead, but his successors inherit his empire and grievances. Reports reach Antioch about Maccabee expansion and success. New armies begin forming in northern Syria. Fresh generals receive commissions to suppress Jewish rebellion. The cycle of violence prepares to escalate beyond anything yet experienced. Judas receives intelligence about these developments through his network of spies and sympathizers. The brief respite granted by victory is ending. Greater challenges approach with the turning seasons. He walks Jerusalem's walls each evening, watching sunset paint the hills gold and crimson. The city rests peacefully within its ancient stones. Children play in streets once patrolled by foreign soldiers. Life has returned to normal rhythms. Yet peace remains fragile as morning mist. Enemies gather strength while friends grow complacent. The rebellion's next phase will test everything gained so far. Justice and revenge dance together on tomorrow's battlefield. Judas versus the Empire. Spring arrives with ominous news from the north. Seleucid banners flutter over assembling armies. The empire strikes back with renewed fury, bringing overwhelming force to crush the Jewish rebellion once and for all. Lysias himself leads the expedition. As regent for young Antiochus V, he commands absolute authority over imperial resources. This campaign will succeed where others failed. The Maccabees will face the full might of Seleucid power. The army marching south dwarfs anything previously seen. 60,000 infantry troops march in perfect formation. 5,000 cavalry ride thoroughbred horses. War elephants lumber between the columns like moving fortresses. Judas receives detailed reports from his spy network. The numbers stagger even veteran fighters. His entire force barely reaches 3,000 men. The odds appear impossible, beyond even God's miraculous intervention. Strategic councils meet nightly in Jerusalem's restored chambers. Maps reveal the enemy's approach routes. Defensive positions are evaluated and abandoned. No fortification can withstand such overwhelming numbers. Some advisors counsel submission. Perhaps negotiation might preserve Jewish religious rights while acknowledging Seleucid sovereignty. The temple could remain pure under tribute arrangements. Compromise might save lives. Judas rejects such suggestions immediately. His father died rather than bow to pagan authority. His brothers shed blood for religious freedom. Retreat now would betray everything the rebellion represents. The only viable strategy requires mobility over static defense. The Maccabees must avoid direct confrontation while striking vulnerable targets. Guerrilla tactics served well before. They must serve again. Yet this campaign differs from earlier ones. The enemy brings professional intelligence officers and local guides. They've studied Maccabee methods and developed countermeasures. Surprise will be harder to achieve. Jerusalem's population faces terrible choices. Staying means probable siege and starvation. Fleeing abandons the holy city to enemy occupation. Families debate their options with growing desperation. Judas makes the decision for them. The city cannot be defended against such numbers. Better to preserve lives than lose everything in futile resistance. Evacuation begins immediately. The process unfolds with heartbreaking efficiency. Families pack essential belongings into bundles they can carry. Sacred scrolls receive special protection. The temple's treasures go into hiding once again. Old people struggle with the forced march into wilderness refuges. Children cry for familiar surroundings left behind. Yet discipline holds. The community moves as one body towards safety. Lysias enters Jerusalem without opposition. His triumph feels hollow in empty streets. The Maccabees have denied him the satisfaction of conquest through surrender. Victory rings false when enemies vanish. The Seleucid commander establishes headquarters in the former royal palace. His officers spread throughout the city, searching for hidden rebels and cached weapons. They find neither in significant quantities. Frustration mounts as days pass without meaningful contact. The enemy refuses conventional battle. Ambushes strike supply columns but avoid main forces. The Jews fight like ghosts, appearing and vanishing without warning. Lysias decides to force engagement through devastating action. If the rebels won't fight for territory, perhaps they'll fight for people. Civilian targets become military objectives. The fortress city of Beth Zechariah becomes the focus of imperial attention. Its location blocks key roads between Jerusalem and the south. More importantly, Jewish families shelter within its walls. Judas recognizes the trap but cannot ignore it. Allowing civilian massacre would destroy rebel morale and recruitment. The Maccabees built their reputation protecting innocents. That reputation must be defended. The battle develops around Beth Zechariah's ancient walls. Seleucid forces deploy with overwhelming superiority. War elephants lumber forward carrying wooden towers filled with archers. Siege engines roll into position. Judas surveys the field with grim determination. Direct assault would be suicide, yet flanking attacks might disrupt enemy coordination. Speed and surprise remain his only advantages. The attack begins before dawn. Maccabee fighters infiltrate enemy camps while guards sleep. Fire arrows ignite supply wagons. Confusion spreads through Seleucid lines as alarms sound. Yet the enemy responds with professional efficiency. Officers rally their troops quickly. Cavalry charges scattered Jewish infiltrators. The element of surprise dissipates within hours. Eleazar, Judas's youngest brother, sees opportunity in the chaos. A massive war elephant bears royal insignia, suggesting important passengers. Destroying it might cripple enemy command structure. He charges through enemy lines with reckless courage. His sword finds gaps in the elephant's armor. The great beast stumbles and falls, crushing its riders and crew. Victory seems within reach. The elephant's collapse traps Eleazar beneath its massive bulk. His dying cry echoes across the battlefield. The youngest Maccabee brother gives his life for a moment's tactical advantage. Battle rages throughout the day. Jewish courage matches Seleucid discipline, yet numbers tell their inexorable story. Maccabee casualties mount while enemy reserves remain fresh. Judas orders withdrawal as darkness approaches. His forces melt away into familiar hills. The battle is lost, but the war continues. Retreat preserves strength for future campaigns. Beth Zechariah falls to Seleucid assault. Its defenders fight bravely but hopelessly. Women and children receive rough treatment as prisoners. The city becomes an example to other potential rebels. News of defeat spreads rapidly through Jewish communities. Some lose faith in the Maccabee cause, others redouble their commitment to resistance. Crisis reveals true character in individuals and nations. Judas retreats deeper into Judean wilderness. His remaining forces need rest and reinforcement. The empire has shown its power. Now the rebels must show their resilience. Jonathan takes the mantle. Death comes quietly to a warrior's camp. Judas falls at Elasa, pierced by Seleucid spears, his body covering the retreat of younger fighters. The hammer of God strikes his final blow, then lies still beneath an olive tree's ancient shade. Jonathan kneels beside his brother's form. Blood seeps into dry earth that has drunk deeply from this family's veins. First Mattathias, then Eleazar, now Judas. The rebellion devours its own children with merciless appetite. Survivors gather around their fallen leader. Veterans who followed Judas through countless battles weep openly. The man who seemed invincible lies motionless, proving mortality touches even the most blessed warriors. The immediate crisis extends beyond grief. Seleucid forces approach rapidly, seeking to capitalize on their victory. Without strong leadership, the Jewish resistance will fragment into helpless bands. The revolution teeters on collapse's edge. Simon argues for temporary withdrawal. The eldest surviving brother counsels patience and regrouping. Let emotions cool while strategies develop. Hasty decisions in grief's shadow rarely prove wise. Jonathan feels destiny's weight settling on his shoulders. Younger than Judas, but older than memory serves, he possesses qualities his brother sometimes lacked. Diplomacy complements courage in his character. Subtlety balances strength. The funeral proceeds with military efficiency. Judas receives burial in Modian beside his father and fallen brothers. Stones mark another grave in the family's growing plot. The ceremony concludes quickly, safely. Leadership transition happens without formal ceremony. Jonathan assumes command through necessity rather than election. His brother's supporters accept the change. Alternative leaders are dead, fled, or inadequate. The new commander faces daunting challenges. Seleucid victory at Elasa scattered Jewish forces across the countryside. Many fighters return to their villages, abandoning military service. Recruitment becomes the priority. Jonathan's approach differs markedly from his predecessor's methods. Where Judas relied on inspirational charisma, Jonathan employs careful calculation. Personal magnetism yields to strategic thinking. The political landscape offers unexpected opportunities. Young Antiochus faces challenges to his throne from rival claimants. Demetrius Soter arrives from Rome with legitimate claims to royal succession. Civil war threatens the Seleucid Empire. Jonathan recognizes the possibilities immediately. Divided enemies present advantages united foes never allow. The Jewish resistance might play competing factions against each other. Survival requires diplomatic skill more than military might. Initial contacts develop through intermediaries. Jonathan sends messages to both Demetrius and Antiochus, offering conditional support to the highest bidder. Neither side can afford additional enemies while fighting for the crown. Negotiations proceed cautiously on multiple levels. Jonathan promises neutrality in exchange for religious concessions. Jewish worship rites receive formal recognition. Temple services continue without interference. The arrangement serves everyone's immediate interests. Demetrius gains one less enemy to worry about. Jonathan secures breathing space for his battered forces. The rebellion survives through pragmatic compromise. Yet some followers question these diplomatic maneuvers. They join the fight for religious purity, not political accommodation. Dealing with Gentile rulers, regardless of terms, seems like betrayal of the cause. Jonathan faces his first major leadership crisis. Hardliners threaten to form separate resistance groups. The movement's unity crumbles along ideological lines. Compromise creates as many problems as it solves. His response reveals political wisdom beyond his years. Rather than arguing abstract principles, Jonathan focuses on practical results. Religious freedom has been secured. The temple operates without interference. Goals are being achieved. The strategy gradually wins converts among pragmatic supporters. They see Jewish children learning Torah openly. They watch festivals celebrated without fear. Abstract purity matters less than concrete benefits. Military operations continue on reduced scale. Jonathan maintains guerrilla pressure against Seleucid positions while avoiding major confrontations. His forces strike and vanish, keeping enemy units occupied without risking decisive defeat. The approach frustrates traditional warriors who prefer direct combat. They long for Judas's bold charges and dramatic victories. Cautious tactics feel like cowardice compared to previous glory. Yet Jonathan's patience yields unexpected dividends. Demetrius defeats his rivals and claims the Seleucid throne. The new king remembers Jewish neutrality during his struggle. Gratitude opens doors to further negotiation. Royal recognition follows quickly. Jonathan receives appointment as strategos of Judea, granting him official authority over Jewish territory. The rebel leader becomes a legitimate governor through diplomatic skill. The appointment carries profound implications. For the first time since Persian rule, Jews govern themselves under foreign oversight. Limited autonomy replaces direct occupation. Progress emerges from compromise. Jonathan establishes his headquarters in Jerusalem, returning to the Holy City after years of wilderness exile. His presence stabilizes local administration and reassures nervous residents. Normal life begins to resume. Trade recovers as security improves. Merchants risk their goods on roads. Jonathan's forces patrol. Agricultural production increases when farmers can work without fear. Economic revival follows political stability. The transformation amazes foreign observers. The same territory that required massive military expeditions to control now governs itself peacefully. Jonathan achieves through negotiation what armies could not accomplish through force. Yet challenges multiply with success. Neighboring peoples resent Jewish autonomy and plot to undermine it. Rival claimants to the Seleucid throne seek Jonathan's support against Demetrius. Regional stability remains fragile. Internal tensions also persist. Religious purists condemn any dealings with Gentile authorities. They demand complete independence regardless of consequences. Compromise looks like corruption to idealistic eyes. Jonathan navigates these pressures with increasing sophistication. He maintains military readiness while pursuing diplomatic solutions. The rebellion evolves from desperate resistance into calculated statecraft. Evening prayers echo from the temple's restored courts. Jerusalem sleeps peacefully under Jewish authority for the first time in living memory. Jonathan walks the ancient walls, planning tomorrow's delicate balance between principle and survival. War, politics, and priestly power. The high priest's robes gleam with golden threads in temple candlelight. Jonathan stands before the holy altar, no longer merely a guerrilla commander hiding in caves. The sacred vestments transform the warrior into something greater and perhaps more dangerous. Demetrius Soter has made a calculated gamble. Appointing Jonathan as high priest costs the Seleucid king nothing but ceremony. In return, he gains Jewish loyalty and regional stability. The arrangement serves both parties' immediate needs. Yet, the appointment troubles traditional religious authorities. The high priesthood belongs to specific bloodlines stretching back centuries. Jonathan's family, though priestly, lacks the proper genealogical credentials for such elevation. Legitimate claimants to the position languish in exile or hiding. Some fled during Antiochus's persecution and never returned. Others collaborated with pagan authorities and lost popular support. None possessed Jonathan's military strength or political backing. The investiture ceremony proceeds despite whispered objections. Jonathan receives the sacred breastplate bearing 12 precious stones. The golden diadem settles on his brow. Ancient prayers consecrate new authority. Power flows from multiple sources now. military command over Jewish forces, civil authority as Seleucid governor, religious leadership through priestly office. Jonathan accumulates roles his brothers never imagined combining. The concentration creates opportunities and dangers in equal measure. Unified leadership can accomplish remarkable things, yet absolute power corrupts even the most righteous intentions. The line between service and tyranny blurs gradually. Temple administration requires skills different from battlefield command. Ritual schedules demand precision timing. Sacrificial procedures follow strict protocols. Religious law governs every detail of sacred service. Jonathan adapts quickly to these new responsibilities. His natural intelligence grasps complex theological concepts. Years of guerrilla warfare taught him attention to detail. Success requires mastering yet another set of specialized knowledge. The priesthood brings substantial revenues alongside spiritual authority. Temple taxes flow from Jewish communities throughout the known world. Pilgrims contribute generous offerings during festivals. Economic power reinforces political influence. These resources fund more than religious ceremonies. Jonathan maintains his military forces through temple treasuries. Roads receive improvement from sacred funds. Public works projects bear the high priest's seal alongside royal approval. Critics question whether religious money should support secular purposes. Traditional boundaries between sacred and political begin dissolving. The temple becomes headquarters for activities far removed from worship. Jonathan dismisses such concerns with pragmatic arguments. Jewish survival requires strong defense. Defense costs money. The temple benefits from political stability. Therefore, temple funds properly support military needs. The logic satisfies most supporters but troubles thoughtful observers. They remember Mattathias's pure motives and simple faith. His son now speaks like a politician rather than a prophet. Foreign policy grows increasingly complex as Jonathan's status rises. Neighboring kingdoms seek alliances with the new power in Palestine. Trade agreements require negotiation. Border disputes need resolution. Rome watches these developments with particular interest. The growing republic has its own ambitions in the eastern Mediterranean. Strong local rulers can be useful allies or dangerous rivals, depending on circumstances. Jonathan opens correspondence with Roman senators. He offers friendship and mutual support. The Romans respond cautiously but positively. They prefer stable buffer states to chaotic border regions. The relationship develops slowly through diplomatic exchanges. Roman merchants receive favorable treatment in Jewish ports. Jewish merchants gain protection in Roman territories. Commercial ties create political bonds. Yet some Romans question them of strengthening Jewish power. They remember earlier Jewish kingdoms and their military capabilities. Independent states eventually challenge expanding empires. Seleucid politics provide Jonathan with opportunities to demonstrate his value. When Alexander Ballas claims the throne against Demetrius, both sides court Jewish support. Jonathan holds the balance between competing dynasties. The bidding war benefits Jewish interests enormously. Alexander offers complete religious autonomy and territorial concessions. Demetrius counters with economic privileges and military supplies. Each king outbids his rival. Jonathan plays the game with masterful skill. He extracts maximum concessions while committing minimum support. The rebellion's survival depended on such careful calculations. Now prosperity requires the same approach. Eventually, Jonathan chooses Alexander Ballas as the more promising ally. The decision proves wise when Alexander defeats and eliminates Demetrius. Victory validates Jonathan's political judgment. The new king honors his promises generously. Jewish territory expands beyond traditional boundaries. Tax exemptions reduce economic burdens. Military aid strengthens defensive capabilities. Jonathan's position seems unassailable as alliances solidify. He governs an autonomous Jewish state under nominal foreign oversight. Religious authority legitimizes political power. Military strength backs diplomatic initiatives. Yet success breeds new challenges from unexpected directions. Alexander Ballas proves less stable than his predecessor. Royal favor shifts unpredictably between competing courtiers. Yesterday's ally becomes tomorrow's enemy without warning. The high priest must navigate increasingly treacherous waters. One misstep could destroy everything achieved through years of careful maneuvering. Survival requires constant vigilance and flexible responses. Jonathan maintains his military forces despite peaceful appearances. Veterans train new recruits in wilderness camps. Weapons stockpiles grow through careful purchasing. The rebellion's fighting spirit lives on beneath diplomatic courtesy. Temple services continue with magnificent splendor. Festivals draw pilgrims from across the Mediterranean world. Religious authority strengthens through popular support. The priesthood provides legitimacy for political ambitions. Evening finds Jonathan studying correspondence in his private chambers. Letters arrive from Rome, Antioch, and Alexandria. Each message requires careful analysis and appropriate response. The guerrilla fighter has become a statesman. Outside his window, Jerusalem sleeps under Jewish rule for the first time in centuries. The city prospers under stable government and religious freedom. Success vindicates the long struggle's terrible costs, yet questions linger in quiet moments. Has the revolution achieved its goals or betrayed them? Does Jonathan serve God or merely use divine authority for earthly purposes? The line between righteousness and ambition remains dangerously thin. Simon the strategist, Simon Maccabeus, moves through Jerusalem's streets like a man born to rule. The eldest surviving brother carries himself with quiet confidence that commands respect without demanding it. Power sits naturally on shoulders trained by decades of responsibility. The transition happens smoothly when Jonathan falls victim to Seleucid treachery. Ptolemy of Jericho lures the high priest into a trap, then has him executed to curry favor with new masters. Another Maccabee brother dies for the cause of freedom, yet the loss fails to break Jewish resistance. Simon assumes leadership immediately, backed by military commanders and religious authorities. His legitimacy flows from blood, competence, and popular support. The revolution continues under new management. Simon differs markedly from his predecessors. Where Mattathias burned with religious passion and Judas blazed with military fury, Simon calculates with cool precision. His weapons are patience, planning, and careful preparation. The new leader inherits a complex political situation. Seleucid power continues declining through civil wars and Roman pressure. Local autonomy increases as central authority weakens. Opportunity beckons to those wise enough to seize it. Simon's first priority involves consolidating internal control. Jonathan's sudden death created uncertainty among supporters. Some question whether the family can maintain its grip on power. Others plot to replace Maccabee rule with their own. The response comes swiftly and decisively. Simon arrests potential rivals before they can organize opposition. Suspected plotters face trials that invariably result in conviction. Mercy appears only after submission becomes complete. Military reorganization follows political purges. Simon modernizes Jewish forces with professional training and standardized equipment. Tribal militias give way to disciplined regiments. The amateur guerrilla army becomes a professional fighting force. Fortifications rise across strategic locations throughout Jewish territory. Mountain passes receive defensive works. Coastal ports gain protective walls. Border towns transform into military strongholds. Security becomes visible throughout the land. The construction projects serve multiple purposes beyond defense. They provide employment for veterans and civilians alike. They demonstrate governmental competence through visible achievements. They create symbols of permanent Jewish sovereignty. Economic development accompanies military improvements. Simon negotiates trade agreements with neighboring kingdoms. Jewish merchants receive protection in foreign ports. Agricultural production increases through irrigation projects and land redistribution. Currency reform establishes Jewish monetary independence. Silver coins bearing Hebrew inscriptions replace foreign money in local markets. The symbolic importance exceeds practical benefits. Jews govern themselves completely for the first time in centuries. Foreign recognition follows domestic achievements. Rome formally acknowledges Jewish independence through treaty negotiations. The Senate sends ambassadors to Jerusalem, treating Simon as an equal sovereign. Ancient Israel rises again through diplomatic skill. The Roman alliance provides crucial protection against Seleucid interference. Any attempt to reimpose foreign rule would violate treaties backed by republican legions. Legal protection replaces military vulnerability. Diplomacy achieves what warfare never could, yet the relationship carries hidden costs and complications. Roman friendship comes with expectations of cooperation. Trade must favor Roman merchants. Military support might be demanded during conflicts. Independence has limits, even under friendly treaties. Simon navigates these constraints with characteristic patience. He provides requested assistance without compromising Jewish interests. Roman demands receive positive responses when possible, diplomatic delays when necessary. The balance requires constant attention. Domestic policies reflect the leader's pragmatic nature. Religious observance continues under state protection and encouragement, yet secular concerns receive equal priority. Simon governs a nation, not merely a religious community. Legal reforms modernize ancient judicial procedures. Professional judges replace tribal elders in complex cases. Written codes supplement traditional oral law. Justice becomes more predictable and less personal. Administrative efficiency improves through systematic organization. Tax collection follows regular schedules with published rates. Public works proceed according to detailed plans. Government operates like a business rather than a family enterprise. The temple maintains its central role in national life. Religious festivals draw pilgrims from across the Mediterranean world. Sacred ceremonies provide legitimacy for political authority. Yet the priesthood serves state purposes as much as divine will. Simon's high priesthood faces less opposition than Jonathan's controversial appointment. Time has validated the family's religious leadership. Success silences critics who questioned proper bloodlines and credentials. Internal dissent appears primarily among extreme religious groups. Some communities reject any compromise with Gentile powers. They retreat into wilderness settlements, maintaining pure observance away from political contamination. The Essenes represent the most organized opposition to Maccabee policies. They view the ruling family as corrupt usurpers who betrayed the revolution's spiritual goals. Their alternative vision emphasizes ritual purity over political success. Simon tolerates such criticism as long as it remains peaceful. Diversity of opinions strengthens rather than weakens Jewish society. Opposition groups serve as conscience for the broader community. Yet violent resistance meets swift suppression. Armed rebellion against established authority threatens everyone's security. Simon learned from his brother's experiences that mercy can encourage further challenges. The aging leader often reflects on the family's remarkable journey. From village priests hiding in wilderness caves to rulers of an independent kingdom, the transformation seems almost miraculous. God's providence guided every step. Achievement brings its own burdens and temptations. Power corrupts even righteous intentions through gradual compromise. The line between necessary pragmatism and moral betrayal blurs with each difficult decision. Simon's sons grow up in luxury their grandfather never imagined. They attend the finest schools and associate with foreign diplomats. Palace life shapes their perspectives differently from wilderness camps. The next generation faces challenges their parents never experienced. They must govern through consensus rather than conquest. They inherit a functioning state rather than a desperate rebellion. Success creates new problems. Succession planning occupies increasing attention as Simon ages. The eldest son, John Hyrcanus, shows promise as both warrior and administrator. Yet power transfers rarely proceed as smoothly as hoped. Foreign threats continue despite diplomatic protections. Egyptian armies mass near southern borders. Arabian tribes raid eastern settlements. Peace remains fragile despite formal treaties. Internal stability provides the foundation for addressing external challenges. United Jewish forces can defend their territory against any likely enemies. Division would invite disaster from multiple directions. Simon walks Jerusalem's ancient walls each evening, surveying the city he helped liberate and now governs. Lights flicker in countless windows where families live in safety. The cost of freedom has been paid in full. Temple chants drift across the night air, carrying prayers skyward from grateful hearts. God's people worship freely in their ancestral home. The revolution achieved its fundamental purpose despite terrible sacrifices. Yet questions persist in quiet moments. Has success corrupted the original vision? Do political necessities justify moral compromises? The balance between idealism and realism remains eternally difficult. Dawn approaches with new challenges and opportunities. Simon prepares for another day of governing a nation his father could barely imagine. The warrior becomes a statesman, the rebel becomes a ruler. From rebels to rulers, The palace guards wear silk instead of leather now. Their spears gleam with silver inlay, their armor bears decorative engravings. These men never hid in caves or ate locusts in the wilderness. They serve rulers, not rebels. John Hyrcanus sits on a throne his grandfather would not recognize. Carved from imported cedar and adorned with precious stones, it speaks of wealth and power beyond Mattathias's simple dreams. The humble priest's family has become a dynasty. Court ceremonies follow elaborate protocols borrowed from Greek and Persian traditions. Visitors prostrate themselves before the high priest king. Incense burns constantly in reception halls. Foreign ambassadors compete for royal attention with expensive gifts. The transformation extends beyond mere symbolism. Jewish armies now number in the tens of thousands. Professional soldiers serve under trained officers. Siege engines and cavalry units provide capabilities earlier Maccabees never possessed. Territorial expansion proceeds systematically under Hyrcanus' leadership. Idumea falls to Jewish conquest and forced conversion. Samaria suffers destruction of its rival temple. Galilee accepts Hasmonean rule without resistance. Each victory brings new subjects into the growing Jewish kingdom. Greeks, Syrians, Arabs, and others find themselves governed by descendants of rural priests. Religious minorities face pressure to adopt Jewish practices. The policies spark controversy among traditional religious authorities. Forced conversion contradicts ancient principles about genuine faith. Military conquest seems distant from the spiritual goals that motivated the original rebellion. Hyrcanus dismisses such concerns with practical arguments. Strong borders require loyal populations. Religious unity strengthens political stability. Military necessity justifies theological flexibility. His court includes advisors from many backgrounds. Former Seleucid officials offer administrative expertise. Greek scholars provide educational services. Roman merchants facilitate international trade. The cosmopolitan atmosphere troubles observant Jews who remember purer times. Foreign influences penetrate even sacred spaces. The temple itself employs Gentile craftsmen for construction projects. Luxury pervades every aspect of royal life. Banquets feature exotic foods from distant lands. Entertainment includes Greek theater and Roman spectacles. Fashion follows international trends rather than traditional patterns. The ruling family's lifestyle mirrors that of other Hellenistic monarchs. Royal marriages create diplomatic alliances. Sons receive education in foreign capitals. Daughters learn court etiquette alongside religious duties. Yet the facade of piety must be maintained for domestic consumption. Religious festivals receive lavish royal patronage. Temple services continue with magnificent splendor. Public pronouncements emphasize Jewish identity and divine blessing. The contradiction between private luxury and public religion creates internal tensions. Sincere believers question their leaders' commitment to ancestral values. Cynics see hypocrisy in every royal pronouncement. Political opposition begins crystallizing around religious issues. The Pharisees, representing traditional scholarly interpretation, challenge royal religious policies. They demand separation between political and spiritual authority. Hyrcanus responds with increasing hostility to criticism. Former allies become enemies when they question royal prerogatives. The Pharisees face persecution for maintaining independence from political control. The Sadducees, representing aristocratic interests, align themselves with royal policies. They benefit from close association with political power. Their theological interpretations support whatever serves dynastic interests. Religious division reinforces political fractures within Jewish society. Different groups develop competing visions of proper governance and spiritual authority. Unity fragments along ideological lines. Alexander Jannaeus inherits these divisions when he succeeds his father. The new king proves even more ruthless in suppressing opposition. Civil war erupts between supporters and enemies of Hasmonean rule. The conflict lasts for years, devastating the Jewish homeland. Foreign mercenaries fight Jewish civilians in the streets of Jerusalem. The temple courts witness battles between competing religious factions. Jannaeus employs brutal methods against his own people. Mass executions eliminate opposition leaders. Families flee into exile to escape persecution. The descendant of freedom fighters becomes a tyrant over the free. The irony escapes no thoughtful observer. Mattathias died rather than bow to foreign oppression. His descendants now oppress their own people more harshly than any foreign conqueror ever did. Roman power grows stronger throughout this period of Jewish internal conflict. Republican legions conquer territory after territory. The Mediterranean becomes a Roman lake through systematic expansion. Client kingdoms like Judea face increasing pressure to accommodate Roman interests. Independence becomes nominal as real power shifts to foreign protectors. The Hasmoneans rule at Roman sufferance. Trade relationships create economic dependence alongside political subordination. Jewish merchants need Roman protection for their activities. Roman goods flood local markets. Cultural influences follow commercial connections. The ruling family adapts to new realities with characteristic pragmatism. They maintain royal ceremony while accepting Roman oversight. Dignity combines with submission in the eternal dance of dependent sovereignty. Popular discontent grows as foreign influence increases. Common people remember stories of true independence under earlier Maccabees. They compare current submission with past glory and find their rulers wanting. Religious groups offer competing interpretations of contemporary events. Some see divine punishment for abandoning pure faith. Others advocate accommodation with changing circumstances. Prophecy and politics intertwine in complex patterns. The Essenes withdraw further from mainstream society, establishing isolated communities in desert regions. They preserve what they consider authentic Jewish spirituality away from corrupt political influences. Their writings describe the Hasmoneans as illegitimate usurpers who betrayed God's covenant. The true priesthood awaits divine restoration through apocalyptic intervention. Current events merely prelude eternal judgment. Such radical alternatives attract followers among those disillusioned with royal policies. Underground movements develop around messianic expectations. The seeds of future rebellion germinate in present discontent. Alexander Jannaeus dies without resolving the fundamental contradictions of Hasmonean rule. His widow, Salome Alexandra, attempts reconciliation but achieves only temporary peace. Deep divisions remain unhealed. The final generation of Hasmonean rulers will inherit a kingdom torn by religious conflict and threatened by foreign powers. Their fraternal civil war will provide Rome with the excuse for direct intervention. Evening shadows lengthen across Jerusalem's ancient stones. The city that welcomed Judas as a liberator now groans under his successor's oppression. Liberation has become tyranny through the corrupting influence of power. Legacy and irony. The fall of the Hasmoneans. Two brothers face each other across a battlefield where their ancestors once fought side by side. Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II command armies of Jews preparing to spill Jewish blood. The Maccabee legacy devours its own children. Civil war rages through the very streets Judas once liberated from foreign occupation. Now grandsons fight grandsons while Rome watches with calculating eyes. The independence won through sacrifice becomes the prize in a family feud. Hyrcanus holds the elder brother's claim to both throne and high priesthood. Traditional succession supports his authority, yet his rule proves weak and ineffective. The kingdom needs stronger leadership to survive gathering storms. Aristobulus possesses the younger son's energy and military skill. His supporters argue that competence matters more than birth order. The nation faces external threats requiring decisive action. Brotherly deference becomes dangerous luxury. The conflict splits Jewish society along multiple fault lines. Religious parties choose sides based on doctrinal preferences. Regional interests align with whichever brother promises greater autonomy. Personal loyalties override national considerations. Foreign powers intervene with their own agendas. The Nabatean Arabs support Hyrcanus in exchange for territorial concessions. Egyptian gold flows to both sides while maintaining careful neutrality. Everyone seeks advantage from Jewish division. Rome observes the chaos with growing interest. The Republic has long preferred client kingdoms to direct rule in distant territories, yet civil war threatens the stability Roman merchants and diplomats require. Pompey the Great arrives in Syria with legions fresh from conquering Mithridates. His mission involves organizing Rome's new eastern territories. The Jewish Civil War presents both opportunity and complication. Both brothers court Roman intervention. Each promises greater cooperation than his rival. They bid against each other with concessions that previous Hasmoneans would never have considered. Desperation breeds submission. The Roman general finds himself arbitrating between competing Jewish claims. His decision will determine the kingdom's future direction. Yet his primary concern involves Roman interests rather than Jewish welfare. Pompey chooses Hyrcanus as the more pliable candidate. The weaker brother will prove easier to control than his more ambitious rival. Roman preferences override traditional legitimacy or practical competence. Aristobulus refuses to accept the Roman decision. He fortifies Jerusalem and prepares for siege. If he cannot win through diplomacy, he will fight for his inheritance. The city becomes a battleground once again. The siege of Jerusalem reveals how far the Hasmoneans have fallen from their ancestors' principles. Jewish forces fight each other while foreign armies besiege their holy city. The temple courts echo with the clash of weapons. Roman engineering proves superior to Jewish determination. Siege towers overtop ancient walls. Battering rams breach gates blessed by generations of pilgrims. The city that defied Seleucid might falls to Roman discipline. Pompey enters the temple's Holy of Holies, violating sacred space out of curiosity rather than malice. His presence defiles what Antiochus Epiphanes once profaned. History repeats itself with tragic precision. The Romans restore Hyrcanus to power under strict conditions. Jewish territory shrinks to its ancient core. Military independence ends with the surrender of fortresses. Tribute flows to Rome alongside traditional temple taxes. Aristobulus faces exile to Rome as a distinguished prisoner. His sons continue their father's resistance from hiding. The civil war transforms into guerrilla rebellion against Roman occupation. Yet, the resistance lacks popular support that sustained earlier Maccabee uprisings. Common people suffer from constant warfare. They prefer stable submission to chaotic independence. Survival matters more than sovereignty. The great irony becomes inescapable. Mattathias rebelled against foreign rule to preserve Jewish religious freedom. His descendants invite foreign rule to preserve their own political power. Liberation becomes oppression through the corruption of success. Roman administration proves more efficient than Hasmonean government. Trade recovers under imperial protection. Local disputes receive impartial judgment. Order replaces the chaos of civil war. Some Jews welcome the change despite its cost to national pride. They remember the brutality of Alexander Jannaeus and his successors. Foreign masters seem preferable to domestic tyrants. Religious freedom continues under Roman protection. The temple operates without interference. Festivals proceed according to ancient custom. Daily life returns to normal patterns after years of disruption. Yet national spirit suffers devastating wounds. The dream of true independence dies with Hasmonean legitimacy. Future generations will remember the failure alongside the earlier triumphs. Historians begin writing the family's story while survivors still walk Jerusalem's streets. They struggle to explain how liberators became oppressors. They search for lessons in the wreckage of dynastic ambition. The Maccabee name retains its power to inspire despite political failure. Stories of Judas's victories spread throughout the Jewish diaspora. Children learn to admire ancestors they will never emulate. Religious groups draw different conclusions from the Hasmonean experience. Some blame foreign corruption for destroying Jewish purity. Others see divine punishment for exceeding proper authority. The Essenes vindicate their withdrawal from political involvement. They preserved authentic spirituality while others pursued worldly power. Their isolated communities become refuges for true believers. The Pharisees emerge as the dominant religious party after Hasmonean collapse. Their emphasis on legal interpretation provides stability during political uncertainty. Scholarship replaces kingship as the source of authority. Christianity will later claim the Maccabee legacy while rejecting their methods. Jesus' kingdom remains spiritual while theirs became temporal. The contrast illuminates different approaches to divine service. Islamic tradition honors the Maccabees as righteous warriors defending faith against oppression. Their struggle resonates across centuries and cultures. Resistance to tyranny transcends religious boundaries. Modern Zionism rediscovers Maccabee inspiration during the struggle for Jewish statehood. The ancient rebels become symbols of national liberation. Their victories prove Jewish military capability. Yet the full story includes both triumph and tragedy. Success corrupted noble intentions through the inevitable dynamics of power. Heroes became villains through choices that seemed reasonable at the time. The ruins of Hasmonean palaces still dot the Judean landscape. Archaeologists uncover evidence of luxury and oppression side by side. Stones remember what human memory prefers to forget. Jerusalem's ancient walls witness the entire cycle from liberation to tyranny. The city that welcomed Judas as savior eventually expelled his successors as oppressors. Geography outlasts dynasties. Evening falls over the eternal city as it has for millennia. Prayers rise from the temple while merchants close their shops. Life continues its ancient rhythms regardless of political upheavals. The Maccabee story becomes part of Jewish memory, preserved in books and celebrated in festivals. Each generation reinterprets the legacy according to its own needs and circumstances. Time softens harsh realities while preserving inspiring examples. The rebels' courage survives while their descendants' failures fade. Memory serves hope better than history serves truth. Faith, fire, and the cost of fighting back. The morning sun rises over Modi'in's ancient stones. Here, in this quiet village, an old priest once struck the spark that ignited a revolution. The flame burned bright for decades, then consumed itself in the ashes of ambition. Mattathias sleeps beneath weathered limestone, surrounded by sons who followed him into glory and death. Their graves mark the price of resistance, paid in full by those who dared to fight back against impossible odds. The story echoes across centuries with timeless questions. When does faithful resistance become zealous violence? How long can righteousness survive the corruption of power? What price justifies the cost of freedom? The Maccabees began with simple clarity. Foreign tyrants demanded compromise with evil. Faithful Jews must refuse, regardless of consequences. Death seemed preferable to spiritual surrender. That clarity guided them through the darkest hours. When temple courts lay defiled and Torah scrolls burned in public squares, the choice appeared obvious. God's people must fight or perish as a distinct community. Military victory vindicated their faith in divine providence. Impossible odds melted before determined courage. Small bands of believers defeated vast armies through superior morale and tactical skill. Yet success brought unexpected complications. Liberation required governing. Governing demanded compromise. Compromise eroded the moral clarity that made victory possible. The transformation happened gradually, almost imperceptibly. Each generation faced new challenges requiring practical solutions. Idealistic purity gave way to pragmatic accommodation. Religious freedom expanded into territorial conquest. Defensive warfare became aggressive expansion. Jewish kings ruled over Gentile subjects with methods their ancestors would have condemned. The irony cuts deeply through historical memory. Mattathias died rather than worship foreign gods. His descendants forced foreign peoples to worship the Jewish God. Oppression wore different faces but remained oppression. Power proved more corrupting than persecution. External enemies united Jewish resistance. Internal conflicts divided it along personal and ideological lines. Civil war replaced holy war with tragic consequences. The final collapse came through fraternal rivalry rather than foreign conquest. Brothers who shared sacred bloodlines shed each other's blood for temporal advantages. Rome merely exploited divisions Jews created themselves. Yet the failure cannot diminish the original achievement. Religious freedom survived through Maccabee sacrifice. Future generations inherited the right to worship according to conscience. The temple operated continuously for centuries. Cultural preservation accompanied religious survival. Hebrew literature flourished under Hasmonean patronage. Traditional learning received royal support. Jewish identity strengthened despite political instability. The diaspora drew inspiration from Palestinian independence. Jews throughout the Roman world took pride in their ancestral kingdom. National consciousness survived political dissolution. Christian tradition embraced Maccabee martyrdom while rejecting their methods. The mother and her 7 sons who died for faith became models of spiritual resistance. Suffering replaced warfare as the path to victory. Islamic civilization honored Jewish courage while learning from their mistakes. Righteous resistance deserved respect, but power required wisdom. Military success meant nothing without moral foundation. Modern movements rediscover Maccabee relevance in struggles against oppression. Their example inspires resistance to tyranny regardless of religious affiliation. The universal human desire for freedom transcends particular circumstances. Yet the complete story offers cautionary lessons alongside inspirational examples. Revolution succeeds more easily than governance. Destroying corrupt systems proves simpler than building just alternatives. The Maccabees achieved their immediate objectives through extraordinary courage and divine blessing. They preserved Jewish religion and culture for future generations. Their names deserve permanent honor in human memory, but they also demonstrated the inevitable corruption of temporal power. Even the most righteous rebels become fallible rulers. Success creates temptations that few can resist. The balance between spiritual and political goals remains eternally difficult. Pure spirituality may ignore practical necessities. Pure politics inevitably corrupts spiritual values. Integration requires wisdom few possess. Perhaps the deeper lesson involves accepting human limitations while striving for divine ideals. Perfect societies exist only in heaven. Earthly kingdoms reflect earthly flaws, regardless of their founders' intentions. The Maccabees fought for the right to serve God according to their understanding. They achieved that right through terrible sacrifice. Whether they used it wisely remains an open question. Their descendants inherited both the blessings and burdens of independence. Freedom brought opportunities for righteousness and temptations toward corruption. Each generation faced the same fundamental choices. The temple they restored survived until Roman legions destroyed it forever. Yet the principles they defended outlasted every earthly institution. Faith proved more durable than fortresses. Modern Jews kindle Hanukkah lights each winter, remembering both the miracle and the struggle. 8 nights of celebration honor 8 days of divine providence. The light shines across centuries of darkness. The oil that should have lasted 1 day burned for 8. The rebellion that should have failed within months lasted for centuries. God's faithfulness exceeded human expectations in both cases. Yet the lights also remind celebrants of choices their ancestors made. Each flame represents a decision to resist rather than submit. Each night recalls the cost of maintaining distinct identity. Children learn the stories with wonder and pride. Their ancestors were heroes who defeated mighty empires. They fought for freedom and won against impossible odds. The lessons seem clear and encouraging. Adults understand the complexities children cannot grasp. Heroes become human through historical study. Victory carries hidden costs that emerge only with time. Nothing remains as simple as childhood stories suggest. The Maccabee legacy belongs to all humanity, not merely the Jewish people. Their struggle illuminates universal themes about faith, freedom, and the price of both. Every generation faces similar choices. Some will choose submission for the sake of peace. Others will choose resistance despite the consequences. Most will seek compromises between competing demands. All will face the eternal tension between ideal and reality. The ancient stones of Modian bear silent witness to dreams that reached too high and fell too far. Yet they also testify to courage that changed history and faith that outlasted empires. Night falls over the village where it all began. Stars emerge in patterns Mattathias knew, shining down on graves that mark the price of standing firm. The story ends where it started, with simple people making difficult choices. The flame still burns in hearts that remember what their ancestors paid for freedom. It flickers sometimes, but never dies completely. Each generation must decide whether to tend it or let it fade. The cost of fighting back was higher than anyone imagined. The price of not fighting would have been higher still. Between those impossible choices, the Maccabees chose to light a flame that still burns today.